All right. Nick? We'll call to order the Board of Selectmen regular meeting for Wednesday, October 9th, here at the Woodbridge Town Hall Central Meeting Room. I'd like to start off with just a few comments. We had two very successful events just since our last meeting. Tom Kennefick, Beth Heller, and Susan Davidson were honored at our Living Treasure Awards dinner at our Woodbridge Center Cafe. And there was a full house, and there were a number of celebrity servers who are present in this room. Thank you very much for that. The event worked out very, very well, and it's always I don't know, overwhelming in a lot of ways in terms of the quality of volunteerism and the extent of volunteerism and the quantity of volunteerism that we as a town leverage, use, and are able to take advantage of. So thanks to you all and all the rest of the volunteers who do what they do. Also, we had Woodbridge Like Me Day this past Saturday, which was very well attended, and some very unique events that took place there, one of which was a runway where families from Woodbridge, from different countries, from different ethnicities, came together and dressed in their ethnic dress and did kind of a runway show. Which was really truly fun, and it really more exemplified the diverse nature of the people who live in our town and how our town is getting more and more diverse. I also wanted to mention that there was a POCD open house yesterday, again, very well attended, so I applaud our residents for engaging in the process here and learning as much as they can about what we are doing. And I'm very anxious to see exactly how a lot of what was presented and what the input that the residents provided, exactly how they utilize that and make use of that. So also wanted to make sure that everyone remembers October 21st starts our early voting. And that means you can come to this location right here in this room is where early voting will be held. And you can come to vote exactly like you normally do on Election Day. And you can start doing that as of October 21st. And it will save, hopefully, time in terms of if you were, the last election we had, as a matter of fact, the municipal election we had, there were lines around the corner certain times of the day as a result of so many people having come to vote, which was a wonderful thing, but it certainly can cut down on that if people come in and vote early. The absentee ballots are also available, and all you need to do there is contact the town clerk. If I could recommend something, only because I've done it on occasion, is to come in and actually fill it out and hand it in right on the spot. It makes it very, very easy and very, very quick if you're going to not be here and need an absentee ballot. And just a reminder, we're right around the corner from Halloween, and our Truck or Treat event that our volunteer fire department always puts on is on the 31st, and it'll actually be held at Meeting House Lane, only because there's construction going on at the firehouse. So the event will actually take place on Meeting House Lane. It will be, their early voting will be going on as well, so it's one of those things where they'll be on that side, and if you're coming in to early vote, you'll come in through this end of Meeting House Lane, closer to the town hall. So that'll do it, and I just wanted to, next we'll move over to our superintendent, Vanda Tenza, and for the report on Beecher Road School. Thank you, Vanda.
Thank you for always having me. Apologize for my frog. So, I was sad I was unable to make both of those events that you referenced, Woodbridge Like Me, and
Please know that our hearts extend to you.
thank you.
For
They
and
were
your
wonderful
family.
events last year, and I look forward to attending them next year as well. So BRS is full, as always, and happy. We have about 864 children. It continues every day to grow and fluctuate. Most grade levels have 5 or 6 sections. I do just want to remind the Board of Selectmen that at the September Board of Education meeting, our board voted unanimously to add 1 additional section of grade 1 to accommodate increasing class sizes. So that will have a bit of an impact on our budget funds, as this was unplanned last fall when we prepared our budget. So we will continue to watch our budget carefully for that. Our roof and grounds project, I know that the last time I met with you, I shared that where construction had been pulled by the governor to go help. They are still helping. They have communicated that they have high hopes that within the next 2 weeks or so, they'll return to us. So we understand, and, we're very patient. It also has been nice to have a bit of a pause. Our kindergarten playground has had time to grow in, and the grass, and so things are really moving along nicely. I do believe I see it later on in the agenda that our Beecher Infrastructure Upgrade Building Committee continues to be led by Dr. Madonic and Antonazi and Associates. Within the next few weeks, they will be meeting with groups of our staff members to try to get input into the ed spec process of how our spaces are used and what our educational needs are. That information will help complete the ed spec study. Antonazi and Associates will also be conducting a few community forums to try to get listening input from the community. And at those forums, there won't be any designs shared because there'll still be information gathering at that point. So I just want to say that when we find out when those are, we'll be sure to celebrate that loud and clear, because we do want people to come and talk and listen to what they have to say. So eventually we will receive some design options, and, those will be shared at the tri-board meeting that I know Dr. Madonic will reference. So more to come, but progress is happening. And I just kind of want to end on a note that our first selectman touched on in terms of volunteering and volunteerism in this community. So our Halloween hoot is Saturday, October 26th, and if you're looking for some fun, please come join us. And it is a fundraiser. They have all kinds of events. One of them is a silent auction where you can bid on certain things. I know that last year Principal Sherman and I both had a principal and a superintendent for the day. It was very helpful. The jobs are hard, so that was very helpful. So I do want to share, though, that I was in a first grade classroom yesterday, and the children were immersed in our new literacy program that we adopted, and they were learning about an essential question: what makes a community special? What makes our Woodbridge community special? And these first graders were brainstorming the biggest reason that they felt BRS was special was because they had the Halloween hoot. And they said that they could not think of another community that had a Halloween hoot. And I actually think they're right. And I chimed in that our teachers and staff make our community special, and they agreed. But the Halloween hoot is built on volunteerism. And when I was thinking about that question, I was thinking about some of the events that you've just hosted and how unique they are to our community. And so it really is a very special community. And, I hope that you continue to feel that and celebrate it. But the volunteers that you have really do honor it. So, thank you.
Thank you. If I might, I have received comments from a couple of the parents who have first graders going, who are at the school, and they were extraordinarily surprised and pleased at how quickly you and the board acted in terms of their concerns. So kudos and thank you. Very grateful for that as well.
We begin our interviews tomorrow.
Excellent.
We'll keep you posted.
May I ask what,
Oh, the issue.
well, just what I understand capacity and classroom size, but what is the threshold of classroom size for first grade, or now what will it be?
There are guidelines that are proposed by the Board of Education through an ad hoc committee several years ago. And the guidelines ask that K through 3 classes be held from 17 to 19. They're currently at 22.
Thank you.
Yep. An additional section will bring them all down to 18.
Right in the sweet spot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as mentioned, we will ask Dr. Madonic to give us a brief update as relates to the Beach Enrollment, Space Planning, and Education Needs Committee.
Sure, thank you. I wanted to take a moment to address the community here and give you a little update on actions that the Board of Ed has taken over the last 2 years. In response to, there have been some parent concerns that came to the Board of Education with regards to space needs and curriculum needs at Beecher Road School, and how we were planning for the future. And I think that they were excellent questions to ask, and I do want to make sure that the community is aware of what the Board of Education and what the town has done to address those concerns over the past 2 years. So In 2022, the Woodbridge Board of Education looked at our enrollment projections, we looked at our class sizes, we looked at our educational needs, and we realized that we were very short on appropriate educational spaces for general education and for our special education students in needs. And so the board, under the leadership of Dr. Tenska, formed an ad hoc committee in January of 2023, and that was the Ad Hoc Enrollment, Instructional Needs, and Space Planning Committee. That committee had a charge to review and address the physical, administrative, and instructional implications of our increasing enrollment and our current student curriculum needs within the current physical space of Beecher Road School. The committee was comprised of our administration in the district. It was comprised of Board of Education members, Board of Selectmen representative, Board of Finance representative, some teacher representatives, and a community representative as well. Between January and June, the committee met several times. We explored our current space needs. We explored and looked at the enrollment projections, both the current one that we had and the two previous ones that were also commissioned by the Board of Ed and received. We looked at the impact of the recent legislative changes on preschool enrollment. We explored shared services with our fellow BOA districts, and we engaged with town leadership to explore some existing spaces that were suitable for school expansion. And we looked at the possibility of repurposing existing spaces within Beecher Road School. The goal and the vision of this group was to continue to add value to both our school district and to the Woodbridge community. And so in looking at all of those things, we looked at not only the enrollment projections, we looked at our current enrollment, we reviewed those class size guidelines, we looked at the current capital projects that were going on. We looked at our fellow BOA districts and the BOA portrait of a graduate from Amity High School because we wanted to make sure that our students were meeting the needs to filter into that vision and those goals. We looked at the Beecher Road School space usage report that was put together by the administration and the faculty at Beecher Road School. We looked at the process of regionalization that other communities in Connecticut have gone through. We also had an equity, safety, and health presentation by Dr. Michael Dieter, which was a review of the presentation of the Bristol school system and how they responded to similar challenges in their district. And we also reviewed the process of school expansion in other towns in Connecticut. And in doing so, the ad hoc committee concluded that we needed to further our studies on the Beecher Road district to evaluate our current spaces so that we could meet the educational needs of the students and that we could prepare for our enrollment projections. So the committee recommended that the Board of Education hire a consultant for education specification study and a feasibility study. The town was very supportive of that. That was one in our capital budget for Beecher Road School for this year. We have currently retained two contractors, Antonazi and Associates and Construction Solutions Group, and those two consultants are currently performing their education specification study and their feasibility study. And as Superintendent Tetska mentioned, there's going to be some community forums coming up soon, and the culmination of these reports, the deliverables will be presented at a tri-board meeting, which will also be a public meeting. So we will absolutely do our best to make sure that that communication about all of those meetings goes out on the town end and on the district end so parents can participate and the community can come and hear what those possibilities are. So I just wanted to make sure we touched on that and we let the community know that we are aware that we have some space and curriculum needs and we are working towards a feasible solution for the community.
Thank you. Maria, for purposes of folks who have reached out to me, one of the other groups of individuals who reach out consistently as relates to the Beecher Road pool. So I always like to reiterate that that is part of the analysis, and the folks who are looking at there are folks who have done this before and understand what's involved, et cetera. So
Yes. We have sort of let the consultants know that all of the possibilities are on the table. So the consultants we're working with have taken pool spaces before and turned them into building or classroom spaces. But there is a cost associated with that, and there may be decisions that the community will have to make. And so what they're tasked with right now is finding out how feasible is that option necessary, and what are the costs involved so the community can make an informed decision with
Thank you.
regards to that space.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question about timing? First of all, great recap, and it really helpful to set the stage for what comes next. In terms of both the scheduling of the input sessions for the public and also that tri-board meeting, which one comes first, and do you have a sense of when either is going to happen?
I believe they're going to do a couple of community forums just about the educational space, just to kind of understand how the community feels about Beecher, how they feel about their services and their expanding services, which will probably, that's part of their information gathering. So that will occur first, but that is not,
Right.
they will not be sharing ideas about how to fix the problem.
Right,
They're
just
just
collecting.
information gathering at those sessions. And then the deliverable, we will be the first people to hear the final
Recommendations.
deliverable. Yeah, recommendations. Well, we, the Board of Finance and the Board of Education at that tri-board meeting, along with the public, will be the first to hear those.
Are we expecting it to maybe dovetail with our budget process, or will it happen outside that?
We were hoping to get it done at the beginning of December, and they're gonna let me know soon if we can still maintain that timeline, or if it will be right after the holidays, which of course will
Very much in the budget process.
very much in the budget
Okay.
process.
All right,
We're trying to time it appropriately, but
great. Thank you.
absolutely.
Additional questions, comments? Thank you. It's a great report. Thank you very much. For our next agenda item, I would like to move that we enter into executive session pursuant to section 1-2006E121024 to discuss the SLR proposal financials and invite into executive session Tony Genovese and Town Attorney Nick Belmonte. Any discussion? All in favor? We will move into executive session. Join our agenda. We are ending executive session. There were no motions made and there were no votes taken during executive session. Our next item on the agenda is a contract award and project overview related to the LOTSEP grant. And for this, we would like to invite Paul DiStefano to join us and give us a little overview as to SLR's work on this project.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Paul DiStefano. I have been the consultant on the project since inception. So far, we have applied for LOTSEP funding through a LOTSEP application. The town's received the commitment to fund for the project. The application involved developing some preliminary design plans, a cost estimate, coordinating with DOT on some improvements going on in the area, as well as part of that was doing investigations to complete the application. Those investigations were subsurface for soil to see what's below the roads. We also looked at existing drainage pipes in the road to see if any repairs need to be made. We also completed topographic survey for this area that the LOTSEP application was for. And now, after the coordination with the state, receiving the commitment to fund, we are currently at the position where the town knows they can receive the money for construction for the project, and now deciding to move forward with the full design, which would include everything from preliminary design to construction documents. And then our involvement would also be to inspect the construction as well. So.
Thank you. Paul, in regard to the information that all the selectmen have, the document that we've gone over, as relates to that, could you just get into a little bit as to what it covers, and then we can start asking some questions about it?
Sure, of course. So the proposal that we submitted basically takes the recently completed application, and then we begin design from that. So the first section of the services here, you see a corridors land use investigation. Because there are auto body shops and a cleaners on Lucy Street, they need to do additional probes in the road to see if there's any contaminated material. Usually presence of auto body shops or cleaners suggests that at one time back in the day when regulations weren't so tight, there could be some contaminated material beneath the roadways.
There's also cleaners on Amity Road.
Yes.
And auto body.
Yep.
And auto.
And auto body,
Exactly
right. So this essentially covers the entire project area.
Are you also aware of where the Amity Teen Center is now, that whole area had been like a jeweler's that had a lot of contaminated soil?
Yeah, we'll look at that too. So what we do is do a cursory windshield review, they call it. They'll go back, look at some old mapping, see what was there previously. And any hot spots, that's where we'll focus our attention on. But also too, we cover the entire project area anyway. What happens is if they do find something, then there are specifications that require the contractor to remove that contaminated material in a specific manner, haul it off to specific locations. I know there's a couple in Massachusetts, but dedicated locations where that contaminated material can go.
And that's covered under the grant, correct?
That is covered under the grant amount. Yep.
There was a note on the top of page 3 that was, that spoke to drainage, and it indicates, will not be required as drainage improvements are intended for modernization and system. So is that saying if the drainage is an upgrade, it's not something that is looked at, or is, because I know we've talked a lot about the drainage, if you could just get into that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so essentially this proposal does not cover a full hydraulic analysis is what we call it. It's because it's like a streetscape beautification project, we are not anticipating doing full drainage computations to see if the pipes are sized correctly, so on and so forth. Because a lot of the project does fall on state roads, essentially that would be their responsibility to confirm the size of their system. We feel, as I said, given we're aware of like a few drainage issues on Amity Road on private property, not aware of really any issues inundating the roadways themselves, that's something that we felt was not necessary. If that were something the town were interested in, then that's an additional, I would say probably $40,000 to do that full analysis.
I don't want to speak for the board, but I would say that it is something the town is very interested in.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's, go
Would
ahead.
that cover something like culverts that are backing up to the road that are town
Yes.
culverts that we're responsible for, and then they flow out onto the state road?
Yeah.
It would,
You got it. So essentially what would happen is this entire project area, we would look at from a watershed perspective. So we would see this, like the area that's draining towards the inlets, the catch basins in this project area. We would analyze all those structures and then the pipe all the way to the outfall. So where all that water goes into the basins and where it discharges at the river,
the West River.
the West River.
Okay.
Yep, yep. So we would look to determine if there's enough catch basins on the street capturing the water and if the pipes are of the correct size carrying the water.
If some of these are state roads, do we have to get the state involved, and is there state funding then to cover that portion of that?
There is not. They will not. The assessment, the hydraulic analysis is going to be fully on the town's dollar. Yeah.
The assessment, in terms of if you identify that the runoff from the road is recreating or part of the problem at that
Yep.
point, that does become part of the project?
That would become part of the LOTSIP project.
Okay.
Yes. We have reached out to the state to see if they have any, they actually just got back to us yesterday. If they've done any recent analysis, they have not. We also question if they were planning on doing any as the interchange, as part of the interchange, project for Route 15. They are not.
The mythical.
Yes, yeah. Well,
So mythical.
we
25 years out.
we saw in the email. Yeah, they're working on the design apparently. So.
Been hearing that for 25
Oh
years.
yeah.
Topic for another time, but there is some encouraging news on that.
Yeah. So yeah, we can certainly amend this proposal to include that if that's something the town's really interested in.
And I'm sorry, Paul,
I'd be
did,
happy to do that.
to Maria's earlier question, we
Yep.
would need state's permission to do that, or,
Not necessarily state permission, but you would need state permission to get access to the outlet at the West River.
okay.
Yeah.
And that's something that your team would coordinate?
Yep.
On it, okay.
Yep. Yeah, we've done several large analyses like this one. Yep.
Can I ask you a question about the
Sure.
project area? So you're going up to the West River, so it includes Litchfield Turnpike, Bradley?
It does not. So the
Okay.
project cuts short at the end of Lucy and at the end of Bradley on the, let's say, west side of Litchfield.
Okay.
But the analysis would have to chase all the way to where the water discharges.
All right, but if the West River itself is incurring onto the roadway, you're not gonna pick that up at all, because that's on the other side.
We will look at the flood zones to see what's going on under certain rainfall events and things like that. That will certainly play into it, because what happens is if the water levels get too high, they will back charge the pipes, and that's part of the problem too.
So things like the Cardinal Engineering report from many, many years ago, I don't know if that's part of this or not part of
It's
it.
not part of this, it hasn't been introduced to this, but if we're going to, until today, we weren't sure we were gonna do the analysis. But if we're gonna do the analysis, certainly there's some reports there similar to some of the other stuff we've provided you that we can,
Yeah.
that we
Okay.
can.
So they've
that
done
might
some
help.
investigation?
We have.
So the Army
Previously.
Corps of Engineers had started to look at the project. I don't know if they have any documents of their own at all, but we had supplied a bunch of documents to them.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, any of that information's very helpful for sure.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so once again, if we do the analysis, that will dictate if pipes are sized correctly, if there needs to be additional catch basins added, and things like that.
And then the grant would fund theoretically those improvements.
The construction part of it,
Okay.
correct. Yep.
And so earlier, Paul, you had mentioned that if contaminated materials were found, that the contractor would be responsible for the remediation or the
Yep.
removal
Yep.
and costs thereof.
Yes.
And then can you help me to understand what the impact would be? So let's say you have to dig up sidewalk or something to access that material. Is part of that process of remediation replacing the sidewalk and getting it back to functional use?
Yeah, so essentially what happens is, so we'll find out pretty quickly where that contamination is. Typically, it's never really that high because over the years, groundwater, gravity, it just all kind of. So we anticipate if it's out there, we would hit it in like the storm drainage trenches when you're going a little deeper. And in that case, they would just put it in a truck, get it to a waste stockpile area, it's called. They test it to see the levels of contamination, and then they dedicate it to certain locations to remove. As part of the, remediation of that area per se, it would all fall under this project. So we're already anticipating milling and overlaying the roadways. If there's sections where we do have to install new storm drainage, those trenches will be repaired, full depth, with the full section of asphalt back where it was. So essentially, to your point, yeah, they would take that material out and then we'd replace it with new material, whether it's sidewalk, pavement, a trail, grass, you name it.
In your experience, if that occurs, can businesses stay open?
That would be critical.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So we currently, for instance, we're doing a very big project in downtown Waterbury on South Main Bank Street. It's like right in the center of where Palace Theater is, UConn, Post University. And you talk about like being very critical to keep businesses open. That has a significant part of that is providing access to all businesses throughout construction. And, we provide some input on that from the design side, and then also put responsibility on the contractor to develop maintenance and protection and traffic plans and, a schedule and, warning businesses when we're going to be working in front of their buildings. And that's all part of, we would help coordinate that and have input on it, certainly.
you.
Of course.
Well, one of the areas that I was just curious and didn't address when we spoke previously was where town responsibilities are. For example, it says with regard to title searches, warranty deed, writing deeds and descriptions, appraisals, easements and temporary rights, things of that nature.
Yep.
That's all identified through your analysis, and then you're going to tell us, hey, we're going to need to do X, Y, Z.
Yep.
At which time it becomes our responsibility to do that. Is that a normal thing, and how involved is that?
So typically, it would be normal for us to identify the properties we would potentially need easements. So in this proposal, I'll start there for 1 sec. So in this proposal, we anticipate, just for budgeting purposes,
5 maps? 5
yeah,
maps?
5 maps. And obviously that could go up or down, but with the 5 maps, say, we would locate those areas, develop those maps, and then from there, you would have to get the appraisals and title searches done. We've done that. You can also, as part of LOTSIP, DOT can do that. So you can ask, if the town doesn't feel comfortable, a lot of towns, municipalities like to use their own attorneys and internal processes to take care of that stuff. They know they know the business owners. It's just easier to coordinate. But other towns defer to DOT. DOT will do that legwork for you. So that's also another option that we could look into.
Thank you.
I will just caution, if that's the road you do decide to take, it's going to take much longer. There will be much more time involved.
Involved in the overall timeline of the process.
Yes.
And when
certainly.
you say if we do DOT, you say?
Yes.
You're saying, I
Yeah.
got you,
Yeah.
I got you.
Because it'll have to go through their rights of way folks, their department. They will have to review it. They'll have to negotiate with the owners, and it's just a much longer process
Understood.
coming out of Newington. Yeah.
The scale of which we won't know until you finish your review.
Yeah, we'll have a probably a generally good idea once preliminary design submitted to
Okay.
really know what properties are going to require easement maps. At that point is when we'd start coordinating with DOT. If that's the route you choose to take. Keep in mind too, DOT will have to be involved to a certain extent anyway, because much of this work is happening on state roads.
Right.
So something to consider. Unfortunately, yeah, the length and timeline, but they will be involved with this project. They specifically, which is not normal, asked for a 30%, 60%, 90%, and 100% submission. Many of our lots of projects we do 50, 90, and 100. So you could see they're a little bit more involved already. They want to be, yeah.
Additional questions?
Will this project generally have any material effect on traffic through the area? Will it be road closures or anything like that?
I'd be lying if I said no. I'd certainly think it's going to impact traffic for sure. I know this is just coming off the highway here tonight. I mean, it's it's
It's fun, right?
yeah. I mean, it's. I think that being said, though, we would do whatever we could from the design side to make sure we avoid any major, we have the ability to say, hey, all right, the way the project's going to be phased is you're going to do Lucy Street first, keep Bradley Street wide open for traffic. Then flip-flop, have Lucy Street wide open, while Bradley's being worked on. So we have the ability to do that in this area because you have two parallel roads connecting both major streets, which is actually advantageous. And that's not to say too they could go further down and cut across in New Haven and come back around as well. So there's several options for detouring possibilities, which is actually it's actually great for a project. A lot of projects don't have that advantage. You're kind of stuck in a gridlock.
Is there any potential to work with the state on alternatives during construction and things of that nature? For example, if you're doing something on Lucy Street and you're using Bradley, is it possible to do something with the light synchronization and things of that nature?
I think we could certainly talk to them. As we got information earlier today,
Yes, I can see that.
those two signal lights on Litchfield just got replaced, one in 2020, one in 2024. And to our conversation last week, they are not timed,
Yeah.
which is
I thought it was just me.
which
No,
is
it is.
yeah, which is part of the problem.
Time.
Yeah, in the opposite direction. Yeah,
Optimal stopping.
yeah. Optimal stoppage. And apparently they don't have any plans to time them to link them together, which they said that they must have looked at that as part of the signal replacements, and there must be a reason why they didn't do that. But to your point, yeah, we can certainly. Those cabinets are probably fairly new. They're probably capable of some simple timing adjustments, things like that. So, yeah, that's
Excellent.
we've already kind of developed a great relationship. Our relationship with DOT goes back many years, but even for just this project, we've been very in their faces just over the past several
Thank
months.
you for that communication. I
Oh,
appreciate
my pleasure. And that just further enhances the relationship. It's kind of a project by project with DOT, and it's good to kind of get on their side early and often, especially with a project of this magnitude. So,
That's good.
Could that involve a temporary installation of a traffic light on Amity and Bradley? At least if Bradley's the primary route?
certainly something we could look at. We did look at potentially putting a signal at Amity and Bradley as part of the
A lot of
application
people
process.
want it.
DOT unfortunately knocked us down on that. Based on the volumes, the turning movements, they felt it was not warranted. So adding a temporary signal will probably be fairly difficult to get approved by them on their road. Like I said, not to say extra police presence, flaggers, things like that during construction can certainly help out with, or alternating one-way traffic, things like that. We'll have to look at that as we get into the design. But all those options are on the table, and we'll use them however we can to be most effective. So.
It's also the last time they looked at that, I don't think we had the housing going up. on Bradley and Litchfield either, so it might be a reason to ask them to possibly reconsider.
You know, it's a good point. When we did our traffic counts, obviously they're not done yet. Everybody's not in those units yet. We project the volumes out 20 to 30 years, based on natural percentage increase over time. But to your point, not knowing where those people are generally going to be coming from and going, you know, it brings up the point that, you know, maybe that's a discussion we have with DOT. So what they said as part of our application was, which was very confusing, they said, why don't, you know, we could potentially install some handholds and conduit for maybe a future traffic signal. That was the first round of comments.
Traffic circle?
Signal.
Oh, signal.
At Bradley and Amity. And then they came back after the second round and they said, we don't support the signal. It's not warranted. We don't want to install the handholds and conduit. Very confusing. What my suggestion would be is, as we get into this, is go back to DOT and say, hey, given the developments that are currently being built on Bradley, would it make sense just to put the conduit and handholds in for now, and then give it, you know, maybe the next 3-4 years go by, those units get occupied, and we look at the volumes again then. That was a really, really good point. We didn't really, once DOT is like, no, it's like, okay, you guys did your homework, you know, we believe what you're saying, but I don't know if they're aware of the number of units going in there that could potentially increase the volume pretty substantially coming down Bradley.
Well, I think there was a traffic study as well when they were proposing it in front of TPZ.
As part of that development,
Yeah.
I assume you guys have that on record, because
Not us, but TPZ, right?
Yeah, downstairs. they go.
that could certainly help our
Yeah,
case. Yeah, like that's something.
Generally, it's a age-restricted community.
Yeah.
And generally, it doesn't, or at least theoretically, it doesn't result in a lot of traffic.
In a lot of volume.
Well, they have a lot of parking spots, let's just say, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be worth taking
I
the
agree.
report that you've done, and I will fire that off to DOT tomorrow as soon
Okay.
as I get it.
Yep.
And I'll say, hey, listen, I know you told us not to install conduit and handholds, but please take a look at these numbers. If this could be a potential, you know, reason to believe a signal could be warranted someday, let's just consider adding the handholds and conduit back in.
Nothing else, we'll just wear them out.
Yeah, well, that's it. And if they say no again, we get our final answer, you know.
So can I ask you a question, though? Is that really the final answer? If they say no, then we're not allowed to do it at all because it's a state road?
Correct.
Even if we pay for it ourselves?
Correct.
Okay, so we do need permission, and this is where we're going to try to get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
One other question, if, for the full hydraulic study, if we went ahead with that, how would that impact the timeline and the process of the project?
It would certainly increase the timeline. Hydraulic studies are probably one of the more expansive, intricate things that we do, just because you're looking at this whole area. It goes well beyond the project area. You're looking at all contributing watersheds. So it makes the project area much larger from that perspective. I would say you'd probably have to assume at least, you know, a 2-month addition
Add-on.
with that, for sure,
But
to
it
the
sounds like,
design deadline.
it sounds like this is, we talked about the community resilience and, environmental, recognizing what the potential environmental hazards are. Certainly, we've seen recently that flooding by rivers and waterways could be very dangerous. So this is the time to investigate and then put the money against it if we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately these events are happening much more often. You know, like
It can be devastating.
Yeah, like Woodbury, Southbury, what happened a month and a half ago.
Thank you.
And we do have a particularly vulnerable population off of Bradley Road.
Correct.
That's important, and Lucy Street.
And Lucy
That's
Street.
important to
Yeah.
consider in terms
Yeah.
of access for emergency services, et cetera.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
with
Well, I
that,
just want to mention so you can mention just for the record that
Yep.
we might have touched on this, but that the design portion of the proposal is paid for by the town.
Yep.
But the construction inspection portion is paid for by the grant.
Yes, so the town handles all the design fees also the fees associated with us designers to consult during construction, but the lots of application grant pays for the construction and the construction inspection fully.
And your fees associated with the management of the project is included in the numbers that you provided us, sir?
Correct. Yep, yep, yep. For us to advise during construction, that's included in this proposal. Yep.
So you mentioned on the phasing, how, is this a complicated project in terms of different kinds of things that get done to the area, or is it relatively,
You
what
know,
would you say?
if we find that the drainage is properly sized, it's not too bad. A lot of it becomes superficial. It's more of an aesthetic improvement. If we find many drainage pipes have to be upsized, then you're talking a bit of a different type of project.
Excavation and paving and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
deeper trenches, longer time it takes, less production in a day. It definitely changes the complexity of the project.
I was just, are you aware of the project that's going on Route 34 in Derby?
Yep.
That, if we see something like that in our town, it would be very,
An uproar, yeah.
be an uproar.
Route 34 was a major project. They expanded from, I think, 3 to 4 lanes. They widened the whole west or south side of the road. That was a pretty extensive project. There's no widening going on here. We're essentially staying within the existing right-of-way. That wasn't the case for that project. That project also came out of DOT, so naturally the design process took much longer. The construction took a bit longer. Yeah, I don't envision that here. Like I said, unless we're finding all the storm drainage pipes are undersized and all of them have to be changed, then, I would say something different, yeah.
Well, it seems like they've paved and dug up and paved and dug
Yeah.
up the whole road in through there
Yeah.
multiple times. As in
Yeah.
5 different firms were phasing it instead of one
Yeah,
route. So, I know these things get very complicated, more complicated than you usually anticipate.
right.
Just, we don't anticipate that's gonna happen to us.
We don't, I only say it because you have the luxury of the 2 streets, the 2 cut-through streets, Lucy and Bradley. So, if you're working on a section of Amity and we have to get people over to Litchfield or vice versa, you have ways to get people around. Route 34 is different because it's kind of it's a main road. A lot of people are coming out to that road. There's some back roads, but then you have the highway cutting through, Route 8's cutting through right there. It's much more complicated. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Is
Of
there
course.
a cap, and if so, what is it on the grant? So the construction work that's covered by the grant, is there a certain point that we'd get capped out? Okay.
Nah, I mean, for instance, the Waterbury project I was referring to before, bids just came in for that. It was 9.7 million. So I think our rough construction cost estimate now is about 5.7, somewhere on that. So say we do find drainage pipes needs to be upsized, we have plenty of flexibility. And also the COG has money already allocated for these projects, and they always hold a buffer as well. And if we do, I think the biggest cost increase that could potentially happen for this is the storm drainage if we find it's outdated. And I believe DOT would happily say, yeah, sure, here's money because you're doing our work that we
Right.
should be doing on our roads.
I would like to think so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. With that, I'll ask for a motion for us to award this contract to SLR International.
I'll make the motion to award the contract for the Amity Road, Connecticut Route 63, Bradley Road, and Lucy Street complete street improvements to SLR for the noted amount in the proposal of $369,700 plus the additional funds for the hydraulic study, which was cited at approximately $30,000 to $40,000. Note that this is be funded through town funds, and then we have the full $575,000 through the grant fund as well.
Do I have a second?
A second?
Sheila, thank you. Is there any discussion, comments? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, everybody.
for
I
your time.
appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a big deal for us in a lot of ways, so we're looking forward to it.
We're excited to make it happen.
All right, our next agenda item is the Amity Historical Society. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I think it's public comment.
I'm sorry, it's 6 o'clock, 10:06. Yes, we will, at this point in time, have public comment. If there is anyone here for public comment, we ask that you please step to the middle desk and state your name and address.
Kathy Austin, 183 Ansonia Road, and I'm here as Chair of the Human Services Commission. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of that commission, who have asked me to share their concerns regarding maintaining efficiency and consistency between town commissions. The commission is aware of discussions by the Board of Selectmen involving the creations of new commissions and/or combining existing commissions. Of particular interest to our commission is housing and recreation. In reviewing the Town of Woodbridge administrative ordinances at our last meeting, specifically 75-31 purpose, which states, "The Human Services Commission shall study conditions and needs of persons in the community, particularly with respect to economic conditions, employment, health, housing, recreation, and other matters related to the general welfare. It shall advise the Board of Selectmen and persons responsible for provision of such services as to personnel programs and activities necessary to meet the above purposes." The Human Services Commission discussed the potential for inconsistencies if a new housing commission is created. The commission is also aware of the possibility of combining the Recreation and Human Services Commissions. But my commission felt it was important to bring to your attention our current charge under present ordinances as it relates to housing and recreation, and to remind the board that we currently provide those services in both of these areas. I thank you for your time and all you do for Woodbridge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're very much the same, actually, for your services to Woodbridge as well.
Thank you.
Tim Austin, 183 Ansonia Road. Good evening. Nice to be here. I'd like to start by saying it was a pleasure being served by the Board of Selectmen and town staff at the recent Living Treasures event. Your work there made a good evening better and was greatly appreciated, partly because of the cause it served, and partly as it was over and above the work you as a board have taken on here. And it is apparent to anyone who looks in on one of your meetings that the work you have taken on here is important work, such as what you just motioned, and that you have taken on a lot of it, as evident by some very, very late adjournment times. So it's with a bit of trepidation that I comment this evening on a matter that I believe needs expanded involvement from you. But it is something I believe you all should be aware of, and we'll take a few minutes of your time to share some information that perhaps is not widely known. During the August 14th Board of Selectmen meeting, the chair of TPZ gave an update on the town's POCD. Near the end of the session, a question was raised about whether the POCD comes back to the Board of Selectmen and the role of the Board of Selectmen in reviewing the POCD. The predominant comment was, "I don't think so," and there was a somewhat soft conclusion that the POCD was the province of the TPZ, but that everyone gets their name on it. I did not hear any further comment on this subject in last month's Board of Selectmen meeting, and therefore wanted to comment this evening, as I believe that both Connecticut statutes and open participative representative government point to a more involved role for the board. The Connecticut General Statute regarding municipal plans of conservation and development is embedded in Chapter 126, Section 823. After multiple subsections regarding the timing, preparation, and general contents of the plan, the statute addresses the review and adoption of the plan. It is these review and adoption process subsections that I wanted to highlight this evening. Just 2 points of context before I reference the specific statute language. One, the language of the statute repeatedly refers to the commission. The commission in the statute's context is the planning commission of the municipality. As the planning commission in Woodbridge is embedded within TPZ, I will refer to TPZ where the statute itself refers to the commission. The statute gives a wide latitude, point 2 of context, the statute gives a wide latitude to the TPZ to appoint one or more special committees to develop the plan. For the membership of those committees to extend to the other boards and commissions of the town, as well as to general residents of the municipality, and for the TPZ to solicit input from any organization or individual in doing their work. The statute anticipates that the draft POCD may not be therefore be the hands-on work of each and every member of TPZ, and therefore, somewhat confusingly, if not taken in this context, requires TPZ to review the plan prior to any public meeting on the plan. So using a mixture of direct quotes and paraphrasing from select subsections of the statute, the key POCD review and adoption points in the statute are as follows. Subsection H, paragraph 1, TPZ shall review and may amend the plan prior to at least one public hearing. Subsection H2, and this one is where the Board of Selectmen is addressed, at least 65 days prior to the public hearing on adoption, the TPZ shall submit a copy of the plan to the legislative body of the municipality, or the legislative body is a town meeting, to the Board of Selectmen of the municipality. The Board of Selectmen may hold one or more public meetings on the plan and shall endorse or reject the entire plan or part thereof, and may submit comments and recommendations to TPZ. Subsection I, 1, after completion of public hearings, the TPZ may revise the plan and then adopt all or parts of the plan and amendments thereto. Subsection I2, any plan, section of the plan, or recommendation in the plan not endorsed by the Board of Selectmen may only be adopted by the TPZ by a vote of not less than 2/3 of all members of the commission. Subsection I5, not more than 60 days after adoption, the TPZ shall submit a copy of the plan to the Secretary of State and shall include a description of any inconsistency between the adopted plan and the state plan of conservation and development. I hope these excerpts communicate the view of the Connecticut legislature that each town's legislative body should play an active, not a passive role in the review and formulation of the PCD. You, as our Board of Selectmen, are duly elected representatives. The people of town expect that matters of importance will be brought to you, discussed, commented on, debated in public, and then wisely acted on by you. The POCD is one such matter. If the POCD will identify our community's visions, goals, objectives, and action plans for the next 10 years. I encourage the Board of Selectmen to follow the statutes as they are intended, that once the completed draft POCD is submitted to you by TPZ, the public be allowed comment on the whole or parts thereof in a public hearing, followed by discussion and debate by the Board of Selectmen and recommendations made to the PCC. All this in an effort to get the best plan possible to guide us for the next 10 years. I've included a reference to the State of Connecticut website, which contains the statute in the written copy of my comments, which have been submitted. I will offer an apology in advance if the statute has been amended and the reference to a superseding law or amendment was not found by me. I'm sure legal counsel for the board will more ably be able to check this than I can. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you for clarity purposes, Tim. For clarity on this topic, yes, we did identify exactly what you said, and so far, the TPC process, the POCD process has followed those guidelines and will continue to follow those guidelines, and everything you said will be part of the process. So we're looking forward to having, to taking part in that.
So far.
Thank you.
It wasn't clear in the process that I've seen that
Understood.
the board, and given the comments at the last two board ago meeting, that the board had no role, it seemed
Thank you.
appropriate.
No, I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Just to clarify, Mika, what he said in terms of there being an amendment is true, or
Oh,
what
no,
he
I'm sorry.
read?
As far as within 65 days, our role in this
Okay,
is outlined and
is
will
what
be
he
followed.
read?
Exactly.
Okay, thank
Exactly.
you.
It will be followed. So, thank you very much. Is there any other additional public comment? And just for purposes of understanding, we did receive both those comments as part of public comment this afternoon, that is in your package. But it was just sent to you this afternoon, so that documentation is also there as well. Seeing no additional public comment, we will move on to next agenda item, which is the Amity Historical Society. And we'll start with the Darling House tenant lease. We have Barbara Baldwin.
Yes. Good evening. Treasurer for the Amity and Woodbridge Historical Society. And this is our annual renewal. So the updated version you are seeing have the dates updated,
Amounts.
names, and a rental increase this year. Is there, and also a removal of a water allowance. There was a nominal amount that if they went beyond, they would cover that themselves, but we've removed that portion of the lease.
Thank you. For purposes of discussion, why don't we start with the motion?
Sure. I'll make the motion to authorize the first selectman to execute the 2024 to 2025 lease with the Darling House tenants as approved and recommended by the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society Board of Directors.
I'll second. Discussion, questions?
I believe, though, I'm struggling to pull up the document right in this moment, but I believe there might have been a typo in a dollar amount saying that it was, the comma was
Typo.
in the right place, but I think if I'm recalling, though I do this prep work late at night, so I could be wrong, it was 11,000 rather than 1,100 per
Okay.
month. So I just
That would
want
be
to make
great,
sure
though,
we're-
but
I just,
that was wishful thinking, I guess.
That'd be good.
I will double check that. Thank you.
Number 4, Ren, it's like, the comment is in the right place, but
but there's an extra zero. Okay.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure we're approving
Okay, thank you very much.
1,100 to go up to 1,200.
So it'll be 1,100 in the renewal this year,
Okay.
and then a renewal next year.
Next year will be a
The
1,200.
following year will be 1,200.
And is that typical?
No, we actually haven't increased it in the 4 years they've been here.
Okay.
So this is our first increase.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Just a general question, things are working out.
Yeah,
You're
great.
happy with everything,
Yep,
obviously.
they're
You wouldn't come and
fantastic,
and
yeah.
ask us to renew. Okay.
Yes,
Thank
they're
you.
fantastic. Yes,
Along the
thank
lines
you.
of what I was going to ask, there's nothing else that we should know, or everything's working well and great.
Nope.
I'll just
Fantastic.
mention that we bill the Historical Society for the utilities at the house, and that's part of what, I'm assuming what you use the rent for.
That is correct. Yep. And
Oh, thanks for.
You'll see it in the budget, it says, Darling House, it's got, telephone and heating oil and stuff. That's, we bill the Historical Society for that, and they pay us for that.
correct.
So those bills come to us.
Correct.
The town
So
pays
we
it.
get like,
Because we own it. Yeah.
because we own it, and we get good pricing, and then we just pass the bills on to the society.
You noted there's a change for water. Is it because you're not worried about the extra usage any longer?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
makes sense.
See no other questions, therefore I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next item on the agenda is the HRF grant submission and resolution.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alexia Belpron, president of the Historical Society, and I'm not sure how much you want me to say about the resolution. Do you want me to explain it, or I don't know what information?
More about the grant, if you can give us the information in regards to the grant, what's being done, things of that nature.
So I have to take a quick trip down memory lane. In 2021, we got a grant to get an engineering survey for the 3 large outbuildings, which we call the cow barn, the horse barn, and the ice house. It's more than an ice house, but the 3 large buildings. And then what work was needed to preserve them, to keep them for as long as we can. Later that year, the Historical Society wrote what's called an HRF, Historic Restoration Fund grant, to the State Historic Preservation Office in order to get funds to do the first and biggest of those projects, which was for the cow barn. And those grants are matching grants, 50-50 matching grants. So that project got completed. It was matched with town funds and Historical Society funds, and we completed that project in 2022. So the next phase is to get the required preservation work done on the horse barn and carriage house, and that's on the same side of the road as the house. And then the ice house, which you don't see well from the road, but it kind of sits beyond the cow barn on the west side of the road. So it has gotten much more difficult to get Historic Restoration Fund grants. There is no longer pandemic money that the state has. So in January, we wrote a letter of intent. In March, we wrote a letter of intent. At the time, I had talked to the first Selectmen and Tony about the match for the grant. We had asked for it in last year's budget. It was not there, but I said before I submit the letter of intent, I have to, we have to hope that it can be in next year's budget. Otherwise, there's no point in writing the grant. The Historical Society has paid for lots of other things, but we can't match. We're an all-volunteer organization. We cannot match the Historic Restoration Fund grant. So we submitted that letter of intent. They only took about 1/3 of them. They did invite us to write a grant. So we are writing the grant, which is due next Friday. And so before we wrote the last one, 3 years ago, again, there was a resolution. It was the same timing to have a resolution from the Board of Selectmen saying that there was a commitment to put the match in the town budget. And the language, and I had sent you both, I think, that letter. We assume the language would be the same this year, so that the match, we know that, the town has to vote on the budget, but it has to be in there for them to vote on. So we are asking for the same resolution this year so we can successfully at least submit the grant next Friday.
And the resolution is pretty specific in indicating that it goes through the regular budget process. So it's subject to whatever the decisions that are made along those lines. And I think you have a copy of the resolution. I don't think does anybody need it to be read?
No.
So.
I just had a question about the dollar amount that's being, so there's a matching fund dollar amount that the resolution pertains to. Do we know that dollar amount now? I know it has to go through our budget process, but.
The estimate right now from the contractors is, the total project is 120, so the match would be 60.
And that's just the ice house or ice house and?
Ice house and the
barn.
horse barn.
And the horse barn.
The Historical Society paid for some emergency work 3 years ago, so that brings down the cost, we hope. And we done some work on the horse barn as well, so.
Right. So this resolution has basically got that non-appropriation clause. If for some reason we don't put the
Right.
matching funds in, or it
Correct.
doesn't get approved, it's just the case that the money's not there. But you're gonna come back to us during our actual budget process, give us more details of the whole project, right?
Sure, yes, yeah. And it's all based on actually the original engineering report, which I know it's a lot of people are different now, but it is in records, because that's what was provided to the town in 2021. So, we can send it again if that's helpful, but it's the same the work is based off the same engineering report. We might have a little bit of an update. We had the engineer out to the house in case, things may have changed in 3 years, but,
Right. So
But
in
if-
terms of tonight, the resolution that you're looking for just helps you with the grant, and you're still
Right.
coming back for that,
because we
all
don't
the
own
rest
the
of the process.
buildings, without it, they won't
They won't
look
even
at
look
the
at the
grant.
grant. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But this doesn't obligate us to anything, because we haven't even gotten to the budget, right?
Correct.
Correct.
But it is important for their process, exactly.
Right.
We have a motion.
I'll make the motion. I think I need to read the entire resolution for this.
Okay?
Whereas the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society has submitted a letter of intent to SHPO to apply for the HRF matching grant to do the preservation repair work on the horse barn and ice house, it resolved that the Board of Selectmen have authorized the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society to apply for a Historic Restoration Fund grant to the State of Connecticut Historic Preservation Office. It is further resolved that the town of Woodbridge has not appropriated any matching funds as required by the grant terms, and any authorization for the matching funds still to be determined is specifically subject to Board of Finance approval and approval by Woodbridge voters at its annual town meeting. Any approval of the grant is further subject to town council review and the Board of Selectmen's acceptance of the terms and conditions of the grant.
Second?
Second. Discussion? What I'd like to ask, Alexia, is just in terms of the 120 total, the contractor that you're using, just, it doesn't have to be right now, obviously, but if you could, particularly when the budget comes along, identify what the process was to select that, to get to that number. And also just any indication as to, I know your folks work very hard on different fundraising efforts. To outline some of that and why it's so important that the town submit the money, help you with this money is, would also be very helpful from my perspective.
Okay,
I think it'll help in terms of that entire process.
okay.
So,
As far as the amounts go, in the engineering survey, they did estimate the amounts. The dollar amounts were underestimated, and then each one is basically 3 times as what it would be now. For there is increase in costs and other things,
Sure.
but that is where that dollar amount is coming from.
all right, anything else? All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Wish us luck.
Yes, good luck.
Next, we will have the Administrative Officer and Director of Finance monthly report. Mr. Genovese. Yeah, I don't blame you.
So long.
The time check, I call it the time check. I always know what time it is.
Thank you. So I have your first quarter monthly report through the end of September. And the monthly report is, there's really I don't have any major deficits or surpluses to report at this time. We're pretty close to budget on many of our line items. That being the case, we have an $800,000 allocation from fund balance to balance this budget. So that would leave us within a fund balance of 8.1 million, or a little under 14% of our annual expenditures for our fund balance. A couple things I want to bring to your attention, however, that have come up and that we may have to fund at some point soon. The first is in electricity. So as you probably all have, we've experienced a significant increase in our electricity costs due to the addition of the public benefits charge. So what I did was, with the help of Karen, put together 1 month, which is July to August. And in that month, we had $6,600 in public benefits charges. So annually, it's based on usage, but if you extrapolate that out for 12 months, it's about $80,000 that we'll have to pay in public benefits charges this year.
What is a public benefit charge? Can you define
It's
that?
a new thing that's,
It's a new
No.
charge.
It's a surcharge.
Please.
it's a surcharge that, I think, was it state?
There
Yeah.
were a couple of incidents, from what I understand, that occurred that needed to, and as a result, there was additional emergency type, or, significant, and Nick, you might be able to.
Sure, a few significant decisions came down from Pura over the past few years after some of the hurricanes came through and people were in bad shape. So that is the legislature's response to that. So yeah, that is an expense that we have to incur.
So it's just a tax that they called something else.
And,
Basically.
and it's significant. I mean, so Tony, when we were hit and caught off guard by that
Right.
in July or August,
Right.
whenever the first one
Right,
came,
right.
As long as we don't call it that, it's
we
not a tax.
changed, like, you know how you can pick and choose where your electricity is kind of coming from?
Right.
Yeah, and to kind of help offset, I mean, it's still a significant increase, but
Yeah,
are
so
we
we're
able
locked
to do
in.
that?
We're locked into a contract that we signed a
Which is-
while back.
Which has proven to be beneficial for us,
Right.
in terms of.
Sure.
In terms of charges,
yeah.
but we are, unfortunately, we cannot do that. And this is the $80,000 is just the town of Woodbridge charge. Doesn't include the school, which is probably roughly the same, I'm sure, or the Amity district, probably a little more.
And additionally, UI is going before Pura with an additional rate increase. So,
Request, yeah, for.
Just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Sonny.
Yeah, sure. The second is, we're monitoring the registrar's budget as it related to early voting expenses. In your packet tonight is basically a transfer to allocate $12,000 in grant funds we've received, but we don't think that'll be enough. I think as an example, we had $5,300 in early voting charges for August.
Oh.
So
And
that
we
was for a primary.
And we have to do this? Yeah.
Yeah. So you can,
That
You
tax
can
is
judge
called
that.
an unfunded mandate.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we may have an issue there as well.
But that's what our,
That's why you have a contingency.
Yes.
Correct.
thank you, Tony.
Okay.
impressive.
I believe we have, next item on the agenda are funding requests. We have 3 of those. First one is item number 2425-03 for $12,445 on the early voting grant funds to the Registrar of Voters poll workers budget line. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve that line item transfer.
I'll second.
Any questions or discussion? This one we know real well since Tony just told us what that's about.
Right.
So, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Next one is the, for funding request 242504 for $20,805 for higher than anticipated liability on workers' comp rates.
I'll make a motion to approve that funding request.
I'll second.
Is it 2 amounts though? Is it
It's
10,000
there's,
plus?
right, there's
Yeah.
10,000 for our liability and 10,805 for our workers' compensation insurance.
So the total's 20.
It's 20, yeah. Well, the liability centers around the increase for our umbrella charge and for some increases in the cyber insurance. Those are some of the major items.
So as a result of those increases, that's what this
That's why we have-
funding is for.
yeah. Right.
Does that need a second? Did you?
I did
Needs a
second. I did
second.
second. Is there any other questions, any other comments? All in favor? Motion carries. Next is for funding request 2425-05 for $7,550 to purchase a replacement switch at the library.
I'll make the motion to approve that funding request.
Is there a second?
I could second it. But is a switch
what
like
it
a
might
breaker
It's a
system?
very expensive switch.
What is the switch?
The switch is,
Is this a Home Depot switch or is it a?
no, it's a switch that connects network cables and wires and such. So
IT.
that-
Okay, networking switch, an IT switch.
Networking
There we
IT
go.
switch. I probably should have been a little more specific.
So, and that's like market rate, that's just what it is?
Right.
Do we put that out to bid? Is
It's,
that-
well, it's for, includes installation of the switch.
Okay.
The switch itself is probably half the cost.
Okay.
But the switch
It's a
there
pretty
is,
generally sophisticated piece of equipment,
Yeah.
Just-
and
the switch there is pretty old, so.
any other questions?
You're a first and a second.
All in favor? Thank you. All right, the last item on the agenda for Mr. Genovese is transportation grant.
Okay, this is more of an, just for your information, with the assistance of Selectman Muno here. We applied for a micro, active transportation micro grant. And I just thought I'd put it on the agenda, and if you want to just give a brief
Sure.
summary of it.
And then I don't know if the documentation made it into our packet or not. I think
It
It
does,
did.
it is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Under his report, open the
It's
folder.
on-
okay,
For
that's right.
the classes and,
Great.
yeah.
So the basics are, I think there's a need to improve and a desire to improve bicycle transportation and active transportation throughout the town of Woodbridge, and we are a member of SCROG, the Southern Connecticut or Southeastern Connecticut Regional Council of Governments, and they had funding available through a micro grant of $5,000 that will ultimately help fund some training classes and programs that I think will be a nice step in improving bicycle transportation and active transportation throughout the town. And I'd also like to mention that we had support from Kate Rosen on this as well. And so the two of us have also been engaged in attending meetings with SCROG regarding active transportation in the region.
And it is something that, from my perspective, it's an initiative that I feel is important from a town perspective for us to enable more bike, first of all, to make sure that we demonstrate and teach the bike safety, which is what this is part of. We have folks come in, and it also, for example, allows us to purchase bike helmets. So for kids who might be biking and don't necessarily have them, but it's kind of a first step in a continuing path to just make bike safety more prevalent here, and the ability for biking in town, generally speaking. So there'll be other things as time goes on, from my perspective, to enhance that element here in town. I know that there's a number of kids who have expressed, and I love spending time at beach. I really enjoy being around the kids, and a lot of them would love to ride their bikes to school, for example. And it would be, in my mind, my way of thinking, would be wonderful to find a way by which we can make that safe and capable and
Safe routes to
or
school.
feasible, I should say. So.
So are kids the intended audience of the education programming?
So we've proposed 8 classes, 5 for adults and 3 for youth, as well as 3 bicycle maintenance classes and classes for trainers to teach future classes, so that there would be 2 people in Woodbridge who could become trainers of future safety classes for kids. So again, this is step 1, and unfortunately our timeline had been to hopefully have this grant secured earlier in the year, so that we'd have been doing it in late summer through the fall. But the timeline came in later than that, so we'll probably, we've just learned that we've received it, so we'll have to adjust our timeline into next year. I mean, if we can get anything done this fall, that would be nice, but to be determined on an adjusted timeline. So if you're looking at it in the packet, which I didn't realize was there, but it's there, it showed July through November timeline. So we're going to obviously adjust that, given that, well, we've only just been made aware of the receipt of the grant.
So this is terrific. Is it part of is it sustainability committee working on it, or who's gonna?
Kate
Who's
Rosen
administering?
will be a leader with this, and along with myself.
So she had been on the Complete Streets team that was part of the sustainability committee. Is it possible that it goes towards what that group is working? I'm not clear what
It's
that group's
absolutely
working on, so-
possible. It's absolutely possible. We can get them engaged and
'Cause they're really good at getting the word out, right?
Does this include electric bikes,
Um,
skateboards, scooters?
Well, I think in terms of a broader active transportation plan and making things safe in town, absolutely. But for the specific grant, it's related to bicycle education and training. So
But it's not specified whether it's an electric assist bicycle.
it's not specified on that. So, you know, and those are going to require some similar but also some different maintenance training. So we have signed up for, you know, 2, or sort of included in the proposal, 3 bicycle maintenance classes, which could address e-bikes in one of them. But we didn't have to specify that one way or another.
Tamika's point about the students wanting to ride their bikes to school, my guess is in this town, there would be a lot of people riding their electric bicycles to school.
it's possible.
A much more expensive bicycle, and also with different safety problems and battery issues and other kinds of things. You know,
They didn't
I'm not sure-
specify, and I
I'm not sure how
certainly
well our roads are gonna handle that in a safe manner, because we don't really have a lot of room on the road.
That is, if I might jump in here, still a fluctuating, I'll say, state of the law in terms of what we as a municipality can do to regulate what we're referring to here as
Right.
e-bikes or e-scooters.
Right.
Yeah, they're falling into a little bit of a gray area right now. There is legislation specifically for ATVs and dirt bikes to specifically address that situation when it came to a head a couple years back. But we're not quite there yet. So I think the statutes as they exist right now give us some inherent ability to regulate how we want things to operate on our roads, but that's for more discussion.
Additionally, for example, what I see, just in terms of my, what comes to mind from my perspective is Pease Road. We have the 2 soccer fields, as you know, we have the playground. There's an opportunity, that's a big piece of property, there's an opportunity, for example, to potentially put a path around there that kids can come to the park and ride their bikes, their parents can bring their bike, but it gives them a safe area to ride bikes. There's a thing called a bike garden where you can help kids learn about different traffic signs and different traffic safety type things that you can do a couple of things. You can do something on asphalt and just kind of paint it out with different types of signs and things of that nature. Or you can do something that's a little bit more elaborate, like what they do in Europe. There's really not a lot of that here in the States, but it's an amazing concept. And it's something that certainly some of our properties can accommodate that type of thing. And it would enhance certainly the ability from families' perspective. Having an area where you can bring your kids to safely ride a bike is something that isn't necessarily readily available here right now. So this is trying to consider all that and see what we can do, obviously. And this is one of those types of items that from my perspective, it's less likely you would use non-grant funds for, because there's a lot of other things we need to do. So if we can secure grants for this types of things, this is what we want to go after. And that's what Kate and Steve and myself have been kind of focused on. And as Sheila said, we will get the sustainability involved in it as well. It'll also help us with sustainable CT points, if I'm not mistaken, in regards to certifications and things of that nature. So that's what this is like beginning. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure we let you know that this was happening, so you understand that it's one of the things one of the initiatives we're looking at.
Do you think it might be something that we could, I think the former CCW property is probably a good example too. I think people have talked about getting a bike path around that, because it would help connect the neighborhoods a little bit. So maybe that's something that we
Yep, exactly.
further.
But it's something that we want to look at. We want to
Yeah,
have
it'd
in
be a
our
lot of
minds
fun.
as we move forward.
So Kate and Steve are the 2 identified residents to be trained? Or is there a selection? If not, then is there a selection process established for that?
So we didn't have to identify that at this stage of the
Okay.
grant. So we just noted that we'd like to train 2 people in town, so that there can be additional trainings done in-house.
Sure.
So they would go through a training. It does not have to be me or Kate. It could be anyone. There might be interest from people, and as we move this forward, we'll determine those next steps.
And those supplies, the vests and helmets are for the classes, I'd imagine, and where would they be stored? You know.
Those are not things that we needed to determine for this grant, so
Okay.
it'll come up later.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, move on to our next item. The Woodbridge QR scan initiative. This is something that we have spoken about in the past. This is the Conservation Commission who actually came forward and really initiated this grant, and this is specifically to put QR codes on different areas of the trail system that would, should you use this QR code, it would give you some interesting facts about that particular area, something specific about that area there. In terms of the grant, one of the requirements for the grant right now is a funding resolution. And that's why this is on the agenda tonight, is for us to agree to that resolution, agree to me signing that resolution.
Oh, want me to read?
Please.
It is resolved that the town of Woodbridge, Connecticut may enter into, with, and deliver to the state of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection any and all documents which it deems necessary to be or appropriate for a grant of $8,400 for the Woodbridge Trail QR Scan Initiative for Historic Site. It is further resolved, Mika Cardoza as first selectman is authorized and directed to execute and deliver any and all documents on behalf of the town of Woodbridge, Connecticut, and to do and perform all acts and things which he deems to be necessary or appropriate to carry out the terms of such documents.
Second.
Was that a motion? That was a motion. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I had a question, and I don't think we have the actual grant. It's not in our packet, but I don't think we had it previously either. So I wasn't clear, but the one thing I wanted to, and I'm sure it's covered in that very widely worded second paragraph there. So Mika, you have the authority to do all of this. But my thought was that the QR code goes to a website, and typically, since it's the town receiving the grant fund, we kind of have responsibility of where that website is located. Websites that are maintained by other organizations can sometimes be hacked. Bad things could be happening there. If instead the QR code comes to the town website, we have a little bit more control, and if there's a problem, we could always turn off the redirect to whatever the historic information is. So I just, I thought it might be important that we make sure that it's not the QR code itself, which is sort of hard, created and then goes somewhere. If it came to the town website, at least we'd have some ability to step in if needed, and just forward it on if not. So I just wanted to flag that for security purposes.
I appreciate it. It hasn't been defined in terms of documentation that
Has
we've,
not, no.
but it's certainly something that we can't, like you said, we can make sure that it is.
Yeah, and then we forward it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Great.
But Mika, the expectation is not for you to develop the content, establish the sites. That's still
You are
on the Conservation
you are absolutely correct
Commission's
about that.
charge. Okay.
Very much so, yeah.
Okay.
Can we get them to share the document with us?
Yes.
I don't know if we.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, I
That'd
have
be
it,
great.
actually, I have it. I
Okay.
can share it,
Yeah. That'd be great.
Can we put that this week? Can we get that? If Tony's got it, just send it to Alice and get
Sure.
it out to all of the boards, get it out to the board this week rather than waiting for the next time we get together.
Yep.
Please.
I can send it out to everybody tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Put it right in that
Thank you,
folder.
Ellen.
I have to put it right in the folder.
Because if we send it, we got to put it somewhere.
Any other questions? Take a vote. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is the Master Municipal Agreement for Rights-of-Way Project Resolution. And I'm going to actually ask Tony, are you familiar with this from past years so that you can give a little bit more insight than I might be able to?
I can certainly try. So we've done this before. We do this periodically to, instead of having the rights-of-way portion in every grant we do and every agreement we do, we prove it one time, and then the subsequent grants are much less complicated, so to speak. That's it's my understanding as the main reason why we do it.
And also, we don't need to be doing anything. It's, if we do something, having this is just kind of, like you said, just makes it easier for that,
Right,
to administer that.
that was the. And I believe
This is the
every
MMA?
town does one, I'm
Okay.
sure, right? You've seen these in other towns, Nick?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
It's pretty consistent. I mean, it's essentially sharing roles and expenses with the state for portions of the roads that they
Right.
more or less control anyway, so.
Is there a
When I read
motion?
it, I wondered
Yep.
what Mika was doing on mixed martial arts anyway.
Getting into
Yeah.
big trouble.
Possible.
Getting hurt.
You may need for self-defense, is that,
Is this something that's done yearly? Does this get updated yearly?
No, I can't remember the last time we did it, maybe 10
So
years?
it's periodic. They'll tell us when,
Oh, okay.
is,
It's
that's
gotta
how
be
we
10 years ago,
notified, right?
maybe. Yeah.
Nick, is there anything included in here that might infringe or complicate our lot zip grant? And
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I mean, again, there's plenty of other of our municipalities who are taking advantage of the LASIP grants that
Have the
are
same.
still like in the same boat here. It just makes sense. And then Maria, to answer your earlier question, it's a 10-year term on this renewal.
Thank you.
this one's only 30.
I'll make the
I
motion.
mean,
It was truly only you.
I'll make the motion to authorize the first selectman to sign the agreement entitled Master Municipal Agreement for Rights of Way Projects.
I'll second.
Any additional questions? All in favor? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the award of the farmland leases for 2025 growing season. These are annual leases. This is something that we do every year. For the most part, they've been consistent. There's been some changes to them. For example, when we did the dog park, it changed a little bit for Keith Arnold as far as the Fitzgerald property is concerned. But generally speaking, there's nothing different that's on here than there was from last year. I know that the farmers have in the past asked about the extending the leases. In order to do that, because of the fact that they are leases, we would have to go to a town meeting to make that happen. And also, I think, in order for it to be of consequence in terms of extending the leases, it's likely would have to be more in the 5-year term rather
Yeah.
than a 2-year term. So therefore, from a town perspective, there's a greater hesitancy to commit a piece of property for 5 years as opposed to extending it for 2 years. Now, I know these have gone, I mean, it's been quite some time that these have been in place, but as things progress here, there has been a reluctance, obviously, on the part of the town to extend them beyond that. And if it is required, and candidly, we haven't received a formal request for that on the table, but I know there's been discussion on it in the past. So, but this particular agenda item is to renew the existing leases, which are coming to a close for another year.
So I'm happy to make the motion on this, but then I'd love to continue the discussion and
As well.
perhaps
With Nick.
with Nick because we dealt with this to a degree with our previous
Mm-hmm.
town attorney, and I think we haven't had a chance yet to get into some of the details.
Please.
So I'll make the motion. I'm gonna do all at once. I think that's all right. I'm gonna make the motion to award the farm leases for the 2025 growing season as follows: Tim Grizz of 13 Bear Hill Road in Bethany for 1936 Litchfield Turnpike, 1966 Litchfield Turnpike, the Eicher property, 1907 Litchfield Turnpike field north of the stone wall, lower field adjacent to West River, and the Zwick property at 282 Seymour Road. To Chris Sorensen of 420 Amity Road, 1910 Litchfield Turnpike, the field behind the yellow barn. And just noting also as a courtesy of the town that Chris mows the town-owned Meese property on Rimmon Road to keep the scrub down. To Keith Arnold, 127 Beecher Road, the Fitzgerald property, 2 front fields and lower field. And the Peck Hill Road, Eldersley, 3 hay fields. And then to Christina and Oliver Holland of 48 Center Road, the Alleghi property, 160 Pease Road, and a portion of 52 Center Road.
I'll second.
And we open it up to discussion, please.
Yeah, so do you want to give the history?
Sure. So, Andrew and I both previously served on the Agricultural Commission, and one of the interests of these farmers is to potentially have a longer lease. As Mika noted, these properties have been leased in 1-year terms repeatedly for, in some cases, quite some time, decades, in fact. The town charter, however, interprets any lease of longer than 1 year as a sale.
Right.
And so there was a request to potentially have a 5-year lease, which would open up the opportunity for those leasing the land to receive grants through the Natural Resource Conservation Service, a branch of the USDA, potentially the State Department of Agriculture. But without that longer term lease, one cannot make that
They're not eligible.
application. They're not eligible.
Yep.
So, understanding that the town owns the property and leases it perpetually to a degree, but only in 1-year term, we had been seeking a path to potentially, get to a 5-year lease. We found the barrier in the town charter, but we have not found a potential solution.
Charter revision.
In terms of allowing the Board of Selectmen to independently authorize something like this versus going to a full town meeting.
Correct, or if it's through charter revision or through in another way. And that
There's
could be.
other farm-related charter revisions that I think could be addressed as well, like acreage minimums, which go back to when we were a dairy farming town, and where you can't technically be considered a farm unless you have a minimum of 5 acres now, or as our charter states, which is not, like, I have a farm on 1.67 acres, and it produces commercial valued stock.
With that, I think there's two, because there's also the tax implication along those lines
Well,
as
there-
well.
yeah.
So, but they're, along those lines, and I agree with what I'm just pointing these guys this way. But, what I will ask in regards to potential solutions, Nick, is there a means by which we can put a contingency in the lease that enables the town, should they require a piece of property for, for example, we need to put a new building at wherever this place may be, a town building or something along those lines, that the town would have the ability to do that. The 2 or 3 years, it seems like not a problem, because there's very little you're gonna do that's gonna take less than 2 or 3 years to get done.
But Mika, consider
if you could get out of
farmers'
it, it's-
livelihoods associated with their leased land.
But
And
they're
if you
doing it
wanna
on
put a
one-year basis
building,
right now.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they're
and
surviving
it's
and
been at their disservice, for many reasons, but under the assumption that they'll be able to renew, because they have for decades.
On the yearly.
On the yearly,
Because
but
that's
it
what the charter
compromises their ability to steward the land and plan for the stewardship of the land in a way that better services them in their business and the town in the land, in working the land. Not to say they're compromising, they're not stewarding the land as is,
Right.
but you're not willing, or as able, I should say, to invest in stewardship
I understand.
procedures if you don't have,
Ownership.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And
what
if
the
you want to
owner-
put a development on a property, I think it is only reasonable to give people due notice to plan accordingly, and so from my perspective, biased as a farmer and a fellow Ag Commission founding member, I think 5 years is more than reasonable, even in that consideration.
Right.
But that's
So
just me.
I was just going to ask though, and I know I think it was investigated previously, that since we are the owners, the town is the owner, why can't the town become the party to the grant? It's the town's collective property that we could improve on behalf of all citizens, right? It improves the environment, it allows for economic diversity in having farming. If the town were to invest in improvements on these farm properties, but retained the ownership and then continue to lease.
Does the town
That's
have the
another way.
capacity to write those
Well,
grants and do grant reporting, or?
But that's where you partner with the
Right.
Agricultural Commission, you partner with the farmers.
Or with the
Farmers.
leasee.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
people are receiving the benefit because, it's $10,
It's
is
something
it?
that
Right?
the farmer would normally do anyway. Right,
Per
and that's
year,
what I was gonna
yeah.
say, and
Yeah.
that's the other consideration, along the lines of what you're saying. I understand completely what you're saying, but the other side of it is, it's $10 for whatever they are doing, it's $10 for the year, which is not something that's
But things
market
like,
rate.
Yeah.
You know
right,
what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So-
but things like removing invasives, which I think was the subject of one of the grants that someone
Yes.
was trying to get at one point, that's benefits all people in the town. So that is something that, you know, we could consider if Agricultural Commission wanted to come and say, you know, we want to go into, you know, investigating this grant, holding the grant. The Agricultural Commission could be the grant maker, just like Conservation just did for our historic trails and et cetera. So it's just something to consider. It's not, it's actually not germane to the motion, so we're way off, but if we talk about it in the future.
It's something that I would like, I've been, for all intent and purposes in the past, and continue to be in support of the farmers in terms of this particular item. However, it is important to consider the implication to the town when something like this does happen. And I think we're at a point in town where it's, you know, particularly where Beecher is concerned, where we're not sure what we're gonna do with all the property, country club and other properties included. So, you know, I would think it would be, it's responsible to consider the fact that there might be some changes. But, you know, when I say about the lease contingent, Nick, it's still more than 1 year, so it still needs a charter revision.
It's gonna be
So-
hard to get around this very clear provision in the charter that says a lease for a period in excess of 1 year is gonna be considered a sale. And
We
then
will-
it pushes us into the sale provision, which talks about the, like, when that gets to a special town meeting in terms of the money that's involved.
Mhm.
So if we're talking over 50 grand, I would say cumulatively, which, I mean, we would be here, or it says the greater of 0.15% of the total budget, yeah, then that triggers the special town meeting.
How is the dollars calculated? Because it is $10 per, it's not $50,000, obviously.
Well,
No, it's the value
I
of the
mean,
land.
That's what I was asking.
I think that's probably where some of the question has come up
Ambiguity.
before, like, how are we interpreting this section?
Yes.
So, I mean, I'd like to spend a little more time looking at this than just tonight.
On the spot.
These expire when?
They're
Next November.
they're for the year, so I think they're January 1.
January to December 31st.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if we have time to table this and bring it up into our next session after we take a little.
So the
We
farmers
don't
Or
have
if there's
a
any-
request in front of us to go to 5 years.
Yeah, and
No,
the
we don't.
No,
Right.
so.
the
we
farmers
have
typically
request
want,
is a lease.
Proceed.
yeah, they want
The
their
renewal.
leases
Renewal,
renewed.
yeah. Is it possible to write a lease that's
In
automatically
excess,
renewable with the possibility of the
you could
town
I don't
supersede
know if
anytime
that
you
would
want to,
meet
right?
The
Conditions aren't met.
application,
But you
I don't
could
think that-
supersede
show you have control.
an existing lease
For that
anytime you
one.
want to, right, if we're gonna change it.
as long as it's not
It-
somehow in conflict.
No,
with
if you find a
financial
way in which that
provision.
we
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
supersede it, so I would
so-
say we should go forward with this so that they are all assured that they can start growing,
Agreed.
and order their seeds.
Yeah.
And then maybe the Agricultural Commission could come back and talk to us.
And also, I do have a sense that we're going to be doing something with the charter. So at that point in time, if we do opt to conclude this as something we look at and change, we could, at
Goes
that
through
point in
that
time, open
process.
things up and reconsider what we want to do.
Yeah.
So,
That sounds right.
but yeah, I agree. I do understand that. They want to know next year they're going to be able to reap what they sow, as they say.
while we're off topic of the motion, but still talking about town-owned farmland, I remember there was a request to bring a field into production by a specific resident.
So that was going through Coupop, but it didn't get to
Okay,
us
so
yet.
we're just not,
Well,
I was just wondering if there's an update on that, or,
yes, and
Okay.
that was that was Jason.
yes, Morrow.
Morrill, and he thought that this particular piece of land would be of great value for the farm leasing, with a lot of great ideas for how to use the land, but he himself, did not want to lease it personally.
Oh, thanks for clarifying.
So, while that's still something I'm sure Coupop still has discussions about, there was
No real tangible.
There's
But
no
I'll,
real, there has to be some clearing too. He gave a really great presentation. I'm sure Nicole can get Cooper.
If you can include me on the next agricultural commission, I'll bring it to the ag commission.
I'm
And
working
ask
with
them
them
about
now.
that.
We have to, we're scheduling they had to cancel, their regular meeting for Tuesday, and I believe they're rescheduling for this coming Tuesday, so I
Appreciate
will,
it.
yep.
If you can, and maybe see if Nicole from Coopop or Coopop representative can also attend, so we can have that conversation and
To catch up.
see if there's another
Bruce Harper
farmer
on
who,
Sunday.
see if there's another
Yeah.
farmer who
Yeah.
might be able to do it in, you know, since Jason's not able to do it, maybe there's another farmer who might be willing
Okay.
to take that on.
I will
Because I've heard his, what he'd like to do, and I think it's a wonderful plan. And I'd like nothing better than to get it done, but somebody's got to do it. So, and there's only so much the town resources
I'll
can do.
send you to the meeting date that he presented,
I'd
'cause his
appreciate that.
presentation they'll have on YouTube, whatever, I'm not sure which group on.
So that does relate in the sense of that's another individual or another piece of property that could be potentially leased going forward. So we can draw some, we can relate that. That's definitely relatable. So, is there any other questions or comments? Call for a vote. All those in favor of extending the lease or releasing? Renewing the leases. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is our town council report.
Nothing tonight, folks. Next meeting, we may talk about the OCT pending litigation, but we'll take that up at the next agenda, so. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll go to our next item on the agenda, which is our board and commission discussion and appointments. There is there is an appointment for vacancy for a 4-year term on Coopop.
I'll make the motion to appoint Patrick Lynch to fill a vacant 4-year term on Coopop ending December 31st, 2027.
I'll second. Any comments, thoughts?
I wasn't clear on. Party affiliation or no affiliation?
Oh, we didn't put that on there. Patrick Lynch is a Democrat. It's a Democratic position to be filled. My understanding is correct.
Yes, I looked it up.
Thank you.
I think Patrick, for his interest, his resume is very rooted in, his experience is relevant, but very rooted in development, which certainly has value to Coopop, and just wanted to have it on record.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Just relative to that, do we have any, well, I don't know of any method that we have of balancing out those issues on these various commissions, for example, with Coopop, and if we put only people on who were interested in residential development, we might see a very different kind of Coopop than we would if we had more of a diverse mix.
I think Coopop is and continues to be, and I don't know that they're right now doing assessments on different properties, indicating what properties, what the potential uses for different properties are. I don't think they make recommendations in terms of we should put housing, and they haven't so far, unless there's very specific reason. For example, on Mylan Road, if there's a piece of property that's deed restricted to putting in a single-family home, and that's what they would report. But so far in my experience, I haven't seen Coopop, even in the past, indicate one way or another that, well, we should be building housing here, or we should be putting this there, or something along those lines. They're not making those recommendations. And I would actually not look for them to make those recommendations.
Yeah, well, it's not their
So,
not
Thank
their
you.
charge.
You know, so,
But I think to Dave's point, based on their charge, and I'm not looking at every
Understand.
member right now, so this is not directed at any one or people specifically, but in a board or a commission like Coopop, I think there's great value in having different areas of land use expertise represented, like in a relatively equal distribution of different types, different areas of focus pertaining to land use. That's all.
I appreciate
Right,
it.
Dave? Am I capturing kind of your question?
Yeah, I mean, I've attended some commission meetings where it seems like we just have one thought.
Yeah.
Why have 10 people if you're gonna have one thought? I mean, you know, maybe we gotta have 10 thoughts if we have 10 people. And that's something that we've never really talked about, but the diversity of opinions is pretty important if you're going, unless you just wanna go in whatever direction there is one opinion toward. It seems like that's kind of not fair. It doesn't optimize anything. So I would just say that I don't think this guy looks qualified, but I just was curious about the the direction of the entire commission.
What I can tell you is that I'm very pleased that we're talking about diversity of qualifications when it comes to commissions and not parties and things of that nature, so we're making progress, that's a good thing. But beyond that, my sense is we do look at their resumes as they're appointed. So I think at this point in time, what you're saying is we're going to start looking as closely as we can so that we can identify some more about who they are and what they bring to the table and make our decisions based on that as well. So I understand, and I think going forward, if we take that approach, I think it'll address it to whatever degree it can.
Sure, and to that end, maybe we just communicate that to the parties as well.
Right, exactly. So that the
they-
candidates who
so
come
that they
in
can look at the
are
resumes of the
Right.
people who are already on, who are currently on the commission and see what they
understood.
feel is
What gaps
needed.
to fill?
Anything else?
Maybe we ought to put that in the strategic.
Well, actually, so ahead of this on the agenda was meant to be the November board meeting discussion. So once we're dispose of the motion that's on the table, I think we're going back to that. So we can have a little conversation about what happens once someone is appointed. And that's part of our
Yeah.
connection to the people that we're appointing, right? We get to know them, they get to know us. And then we have a sense of where that commission is going, because
Thank you
otherwise we
for
don't.
reminding me that I went out of order.
That's okay. That's all right. That's all right.
I think I jumped the gun on that.
Sorry about that.
Very gentle.
Sorry about that.
It was very gentle, very subtle.
We'll get back to
very
this.
subtle. We will get back to that, I promise. But right now, I think we do have a motion and a second. So
No, it's been seconded.
it is. And if there's any other discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And item A. There is an update to be provided on this. I very recently, in speaking with Tony, feel like we'll take a different approach on this idea I had about the November commission meeting. And in the past, what we've done is we've held a holiday meeting for all the members of the boards and commissions. Tony and I felt like we wanted to bring that back. We felt it would be good to get people to interact again. And so we feel like, okay, we have this in November, and then we're looking to do something in December. My sense is that what we should do is plan a get-together for all the commission members in December as a holiday get-together. And as part of that holiday get-together, have a short session where we do have a business meeting, so it may still be noticed, and we still would provide some information. But that would be less of a, major type of huge discussion than what was originally planned. And just because of the timing on this and what we're looking for, we're feeling like move it to December, make it a combination of things where we can speak very briefly on a couple of items where we feel it's important. Like have a slide on some of the budget things that are going on, have a slide on some of on the strategic plan. Keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it succinct, and
So like 3 hours.
so, if you're dealing from our perspective. So, and we can do that at a time that's not necessarily part of the meeting, so we don't have that limitation in terms of the 13th as far as our agenda is concerned.
So Mika, not necessarily in this venue, but in a venue that accommodates we recess the meeting
Wherever
and then
we-
have a
Well,
social
and I-
hour.
Right.
Yeah, and from in my experience, we've also done where we choose a venue that has both capabilities. You
Right.
choose a venue
So
where you have
something like
people
Oak
can
Lane,
sit down, and
something
then
like
you
that.
just get up and you basically have a space where you
Yeah,
move
that's
around.
good. Yeah.
So it's, I mean, it's done all the time in regards to a lot of the events we go to, you know, the municipal meetings and stuff like that. So,
We had a meeting like that at Oak Lane a long time ago.
We did, a
Oak Lane
long
was
time
one
ago.
that I used to use it a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
I used to use it a lot, so.
Well, that helps November's crunch for
Yes,
the
it
Board of
does.
Selectmen meeting as
Yes,
well,
it
because I was getting a little worried about that.
Yes, it does. So that's more of an informational type thing, more to follow on that, and we'll go from there.
Right.
Do you
Can I,
have a
can I ask you?
date in mind?
No, we haven't selected a date.
Yeah.
Karen and I just looked at each other like, this is the first we're hearing about it.
Start scheduling.
You'll hear a lot about it
Let's
tomorrow. So,
Big production. Can I ask a question, though, about, with regard to the strategic plan? I know
Please.
it got, did it get sent to all of them, and did we do the summary piece to them? Just so that
summary
they
piece
would
has not gone
have-
out. I have looked at it at this point,
Yeah.
so. Summary piece has not gone out, and not every board of commission, all of them are most of them are aware of it. You know, it's interesting, because when I say all the commissions, I forget that there are some very small commissions, you know, that don't even meet regularly.
Yeah.
So the commissions that are meeting regularly, that are on my calendar are the ones that I'm referring to. We will formally send out to everyone the strategic plan to make sure they have it, all the chairs. And that'll be part of what we discuss.
And I guess the reason I'm thinking of it is I did attend the charrette or the open house for the POCD, and we also had comment tonight about the POCD process. And I did get a chance to talk with one of the folks from SLR about how our strategic plan as a Board of Selectmen, which is just a 2-year plan, how does it possibly interact with a 10-year plan that's being contemplated? So that's an open question, but that's sort of, I would think, part of our connection to all the boards and commissions who report to us or recommend to us. They're envisioned in our strategic plan. Is that how they're going to get their input into the POCD? Those things are all kind of up in the air.
Yeah, I see it a little differently. You know, we say it's a 2-year plan because the term is 2 years. However, you know, for virtually every plan that's put into place is limited by whoever the leadership of that particular organization is. So I don't see it as a 2-year plan. What I see it as a vision for the future, for how we move forward. What's our priorities? What are we trying to get done? I don't put a timeline on it from that perspective. Can it change in 2 years because leadership changes? Absolutely. But can a new leader adopt the same plan? We largely adopted what was in place before. So I don't see it as a 2-year plan. This isn't like, we're gonna do this in 2 years. We're gonna take these steps to move the town forward. That's the way I see it. So it's up to whoever's in the leadership role to determine what the new priorities might be, but I think it fits. I don't consider it a 2-year plan, so the POCD should regard it as, these are our priorities currently, you know, so they should take that into consideration from that perspective. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, and that's helpful illumination to, you know, I'm sure at some point we're gonna have a conversation more about the POCD and our input as the Board of Selectmen. But then, is that also a message for boards and commissions who make recommendations to us that this is how we see their work and what we're interested in? Of course they can give us input, and I actually did speak to someone who said that he wrote up some input, but I don't have it. So just getting that process moving a little bit. Maybe with this meeting in December, we open the door to that a little bit.
I think it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, work it into, because if this is our vision for more than just a 2-year plan, more of the future of the town, then this is the basis of maybe what we're gonna say to TPZ as our input for the POCD. That's a mouthful of acronyms. I'm sorry to anyone listening at home. But maybe, so that's, we can talk more. I know we have a strategic plan committee meeting on the books already for next week, right?
We do.
Great. Thanks.
Anything else, folks? We will move on to the ordinance committee update. Deputy Selectman Muno.
All right. So we did have an ordinance committee special meeting in which we created a number of action items for our town council.
Good job.
On it.
Yeah. Thank you. So as come up, as we know, the housing committee is something of particular interest for ordinance at this moment, and potentially creating a housing commission. So we've asked the town council to draft language for a standing housing commission that fits with our ordinances and with our charter and such, and can be ready for consideration at an upcoming meeting. We will meet again before our next Board of Selectmen meeting, potentially more than once if we can, to go over the updates and have something ready for us. We discussed membership numbers for the housing commission. Current committee is 9. Doesn't have to stay 9 for our commission. We talked about connecting with and set Mika with some follow-up items as well to connect with the housing chair. We talked about how housing and TPZ communicate, and I think there's more for us to discuss on this at our upcoming meetings. So.
Yeah, it's really gonna jump off of the red lines and the comments that I submit to the ordinance subcommittee, which we're still finalizing, and so we're not quite there yet, but that's the next step.
Can I ask a question, just because I did attend, but as a member of the public, and there wasn't public comment, so should we try to talk at this meeting about I do have a lot of ideas, having listened, or is that it'd be better to react to a red line of some sort, I think, but is that possible for a non-member of the committee to?
Yeah, I mean, it's on the agenda. I think you can discuss it
Right now.
here. Sure.
Yep.
I mean, you can
Yeah,
defer your comments until there's an actual working document to comment upon. But
Or I could help
that's
inform
certainly
that
your
document.
choice.
Yeah. All right, well, just not to take up a lot of time, but, so I was intrigued to hear what Human Services had to say as well. And I know that in our strategic plan committee, we've talked about trying to consolidate, and it sort of occurred to me that now we're also expanding. But that being said,
Consolidate, and now we're also expanding it on.
well, we're adding another commission rather
Okay.
than consolidate. If we
Where-
were going after, Human Services and Recreation coming together, but we just split off another commission that potentially could be part of Human Services, I don't know if we want to
If I'm
consider
not
that.
mistaken, the housing committee has been in place for almost 2 years.
As an ad hoc.
But it-
As-
Yeah, it was
So
responsive.
we're making it
But the
permanent,
function
yeah,
has
yeah.
been,
But it
they've been
was
performing the function, the
primarily
people have
come
been
up
meeting.
with the
So
plan.
what we're doing is we're changing the name of a group, we're changing the designation of a group that already exists.
Well,
It's not
its
creating
charge was to
something new.
create a housing plan,
Right,
which
yeah,
they
we're
accomplished.
Totally changing their charge.
Right.
And so now
Yeah.
it's
And like,
creating
The
a
red line we
proper
don't have in front of us.
commission, right? Whereas before, it was, here's this ad hoc group to do this specific thing. And then the thought was that would be that.
So in a time where we're being sued for lack of, for whatever the situation, whatever it is, where the last thing that I'm looking to do is eliminate a housing group that spearheads our effort to do something that the state and we
Yeah.
have said we want to do.
So it's probably important
So-
for that to be the most efficient and able to accomplish setup that we can make it, right? So that's the question. I don't think there's a question that we
About
shouldn't have
the-
housing
Yeah.
So,
talked
well,
about.
well,
Question
there
is,
is. Let's-
is it more efficient? I mean, the idea that it should be part of Human Services, which has staff. So we're talking about a commission, and this wasn't discussed at the ordinance committee meeting, but got maybe a 7 or 9 member commission, and you don't really have staff, and that's in order to get things done, they're gonna need staff. And so if they're gonna use the Human Services staff, or they're gonna use the zoning regulation group staff, how is a commission best created that it's very clear how they're gonna get work done?
All our commissions have a staff member who assists. So the same could be said about every commission that we have as to, well, how do we make sure?
Staffing isn't defined necessarily in, I'm just taking a moment to think.
Yeah. So things like our recreation
Like literally
commission-
staffing is never spelled out in a charge or an ordinance or a charter provision that establishes a given board or a commission. Can it happen? Sure, but then you're sort of tying the administration's hands when maybe staff falls off for budgeting purposes one year, or you need to redirect where the best usage of staffing is going to be. So I think that's probably the incentive behind not putting that level of detail into an actual law that we're then obligated to follow.
Sure. So when we have discussions about commissions, certainly at the strategic plan committee level, we looked at, is there a way to make government more efficient, save money in the budgeting process, et cetera, by consolidating? That was the whole point of the
We
piece
don't-
that we're mentioning here about human services and recreation.
Our commissions are volunteers,
Yes.
so they're not adding to the budget. We're talking about housing. I'm taken aback, only because every town has expanded from, that I've had exposure to, that I've met with at SCROG, all of the dialogue with regard to, there is so much dialogue with regard to housing in our communities. And what I'm hearing is you're suggesting that we not follow suit in making a housing group a formal part of our government. It's currently, and we're talking about a group that's already been in place for a couple of years. So it's not as if we're establishing anything new. All we are doing is we're reclassifying a committee, and we're doing it specifically because the word committee isn't used in our ordinance, and making it a commission which follows the same rules and same guidelines and the same things as all our other commissions, and performs a function that is, in my mind, hugely critical for our town. So I'm missing something, I guess. Please help me understand better.
Yeah, that wasn't my intent.
Okay, 'cause
So
that's what I'm hearing.
Okay. So let me put it this way. The housing plan, the affordable housing plan that was created by that first ad hoc, it came to the Board of Selectmen that David and I sat on, and part of that plan contemplated establishing a commission that would deal with certain issues on an ongoing basis. Not the creation of the plan, but the steps that needed to be taken leading government. And I do believe there's a role for our local government to have strong proponents, making sure that we can do housing that fits in our community, that can be supported by our community, people feel welcome in our community. So that recommendation to make a standing commission is essentially what we're acting on. When we went to ordinance, it basically went from that plan, which we agreed is the town's plan for housing. And then I think the only question that's at ordinance right now is how best to establish this. What is the charge? How are people going to accomplish the charge? So when we talk about something like the Human Services Commission, those are all volunteers, but then there is staff on the town payroll that work with that commission and take direction from that commission. Same thing happens with recreation, same thing happens with library.
Coopop and everybody else, yes, I understand.
Well, but Coopop doesn't have specific staff. They have someone taking notes. They don't have a staff person. Like, we have Tony here at this meeting, we have
There are
Karen, we
commissions
have
that are
Allison.
associated with departments, and there are commissions that are not.
Right.
Like, yeah, so human
should this
services.
be a commission that's associated with a department? That's the question.
We don't have a housing department. We could
So-
create one.
Your question is, should this commission be associated with the Human Services Department or potentially TPZ
Or a new housing department?
or a new housing department?
Do we need
That's
that?
the
So
question.
I just want to,
I understood.
I'm just trying to understand what are we intending and how are we going to support it? Because I want to see it succeed. Not that I don't want it to happen. I want to see it succeed.
So I think that's definitely something we should consider in our ordinance discussion of not only the details of what the ordinance says, but how to ensure it's going to be effective and where it might live. So we didn't get into those details, but as was presented to us by Human Services tonight, I didn't hear a question of should housing be part of Human Services. That's not what I heard. I heard a note that said there might be inconsistencies overlap might be an appropriate word, and there are existing overlaps between existing commissions, which is sensible, but I don't necessarily see a conflict. I'm curious to hear more and would love to follow up with the Human Services Commission.
I would,
On
same
their
here,
thoughts
because I didn't
on
quite
that, but-
understand.
But they didn't make a request, and they didn't, so, I don't know the details of their discussion, but they didn't ask that it become part of, their charge, so I'd like to hear more about that, but of course also TP&Z is another department that does planning, that could relate to housing,
Yep.
and there's a commission there, so I think it's certainly worthy of further discussion at ordinance, how this can best succeed, which I think is your point.
Bureaucracy does have a way of growing on its own, and there's an opportunity cost to taking somebody's time for something that they didn't previously have to do. So there is, our job is to figure out what those priorities are. And I think when we were looking at the strategic plan originally, we were trying to identify where that bureaucratic creep had gone beyond what we needed. Where maybe it was a department, we had a person that really wasn't an issue, that they needed to be doing overtime work to take notes at a commission that rarely had a quorum, for example, or something like that. So, keeping things focused on what's really important so that we don't just keep growing without understanding that there is some budget element to it.
I understand. We created a committee, not we, but actually you did. Two of you did.
Yes.
You were
We
part
can-
of
we
that.
can tell you
created a committee
about that, yeah.
For housing.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
it's existed now for years. And so it's not, I don't see it as an added bureaucracy because it exists. Again, we're reclassifying it from a committee to a commission. We are working on what its charges to make it as efficient as possible. And when we talk about, like when rec, as I say, I'm not exactly sure, and I put it on my calendar, as a matter of fact, when the public comment came in, to attend the next meeting. As luck would have it, it conflicts with TPZ, and there's some pretty important things going on with TPZ, so I gotta figure that all out. But the bottom line is, I felt like I needed to understand that better. So I'll reach out to Jeanette, and I'll reach out to Kathy, who made the public comment, to understand what they're looking at better. Because the reality, when we're talking commissions, what we're looking to do from a town perspective is to combine departments. We're looking to combine staff, and that's recreation and human services. And there's many municipalities who have a community services department. And that community services department does encompass sometimes more than just human services and recreation, but it does, certainly those two are usually included in that. And we're looking to follow that model. And we're looking to that specifically to see if there are ways we can utilize resources in a way that'll enable us to deliver more or better services, to optimize. We're truly not looking at it initially. We're not looking at it as a downsizing or a money saving. We're looking at it to make us better and more efficient with the resources that we have. Nothing to do with the commissions. However, they both have commissions. So now we have to decide what we're going to do. So we have an opportunity with that to reduce the bureaucracy in the number of commissions by combining those two commissions into one. There's a lot involved in that. That's why we have to discuss it. We have to figure that all out as to how we make that work, because you have two separate commissions that now, you're not gonna have a commission of 25 people, or whatever it is, 18 people or whatever it is.
So Mika,
But again, keep in mind that, and that's why I say I really need to understand what their comments are really, what they're pointing to, because we're looking to combine two departments, town departments, resources.
Yeah.
And the commission is a whole different, and I'm not sure how housing fits into that. I understand that.
well, it's community services, do you
No,
see
there's
it
two
that
different
way?
elements.
I don't know if you see it.
No, I don't,
Okay.
I see housing being part of community services the
Yes.
way, they say economic conditions. We're not gonna make finance part of human services because they're involved with economics. We're not going to make,
Well, it's the economic conditions
we're not gonna
of
make
human
EMS part of human services because they're part of health services or fire for safety or anything along those lines. So that's where I'm seeing the disconnect. It's like, I understand what their charge is, but I don't see how that relates to a housing committee that specifically is charged with doing something that they don't do. And they are very well engaged. Our human services department is very impressive, and they are very well engaged. Those people work hard. To add additional responsibilities to them is not something that I would look to do right now and I'm talking from a manager's standpoint. And in looking at the resources that we have and what they do and how much time they spend doing it. That's not something that makes a lot of sense from my perspective. So I guess I've made it kind
Yeah, I
of
think,
let you know where I stand on
I
this.
think the discussion has gone a little more broadly away from the specifics of the housing commission. So I would, for one, would like to just talk a little bit about that because in our examples that we saw some, I thought we had some good examples that we were modeling from other towns. But we talked a little bit about our housing commission being a housing commission. And one of the things they were going to do was affordable housing, but there were other issues that housing would take up. And I felt like, to me, when I read, maybe it was Southbury's, that one of them, it was said, they called themselves a housing commission, but the entire description of it, every sentence had affordable housing written in it. So it was kind of like, well, you said you're a housing commission, but all you're talking about is affordable housing. And I don't think that's, in my mind, that isn't as broad or as helpful because it's just one area,
In some towns, I'll reference Guilford. Guilford has an affordable housing group, and they have a housing authority, if I'm not mistaken, or another separate group.
Yeah.
So the affordable housing group specifically focuses on that.
Right.
So, but they've expanded it. They've taken that route where they feel like they need somebody to focus on affordable, and then they need somebody to focus, like you're mentioning. We're somewhat smaller, and I think our group can probably do both, is what it boils down to. But I understand and that's why the charge is, in my opinion, so important. And I'm sorry,
well, and
that
that was just what I wanted to discuss at the table a little bit, was what the charge should be. I mean, if we're going to create the small group affordable housing commission, that would be different than housing commission in my mind. And maybe not, but
I see the opportunity to do both, though, David, for a group of whatever number of people we decide.
Sure.
To do both, in our town.
You mean one entity covering multiple aspects of housing? Meaning the housing commission might be charged with helping identify ways to foster aging in place.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or
And not
they
just.
they can work with human services to do that.
That's an example of what
Yes.
Human Services
Yeah.
already does.
They can
Okay,
work with
so
human
there's
services to do that.
That's why there is some
inherent
synergy
Yeah.
But
between
see,
Human Services.
housing, from my perspective, is the provision of housing, the availability of housing, the options of the housing options. Where aging in place is more, somebody lives in their house already. We're not looking for them to
Yeah,
move,
but it
and we want to
prevents
keep
the
them there.
need to develop.
That's what we wanted to.
It affects the market.
It absolutely
right?
does.
So
So
that's availability of housing. That it's all connected, and so there'll always be overlap
Yeah,
in
I
this
agree.
in these ways, and I think that's why it's really important to have, I would say, a more inclusive, more broadly encompassing charge, and in terms of the number of people, I think all the more reason to have a 9-person versus 7, because you can increase the diversity of expertise and thought and qualifications on the commission. Trying to avoid saying committee. And I just kind of have a question while we're on that topic. So I saw your action item, Mika, related to the membership of this future commission was to follow up with the housing chair to inquire. So at what point, well, I guess now we're talking about it as a board.
As a commission.
I'm sorry?
As a com- Okay.
Our Board of Selectmen.
Our Board of
oh,
Selectmen.
sorry.
So when I read these minutes, my first question pertaining to that was, I understand the logic there, a respectful thing to do, sensible thing to do, but shouldn't we be followed up with about this? Like, is our perspective on the number of members and these other aspects of, I'm just going to say, legitimizing the commission or taking the committee into a commission, what role are we playing in that?
What we're doing right now.
Okay.
We're having the dialogue. The reason we have these updates is specifically to get the input and to have the dialogue that we're having.
Okay,
So this is the role.
a specific question. Did you follow up with Kathy about
I've
that?
spoken to Kathy
And
in
what did
regards
she-
to it.
what-
We haven't come to a particular number, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. Well, it feels important for me to advocate for a 9-person. It increases minority representation. I know statistically it doesn't skew it too strongly, but I think it's very important to have. And I think it promotes more diversity of thought and expertise.
Appreciate it. And that's something for our ordinance chair to consider in the group, so.
And I also think, as you said, there is overlap between our various commissions and some committees that we have now. I think that's just inherent in how, things are just connected, and especially since we're such a small town. But I think also there is a lot of work to be done nowadays, keeping up with state statutes, keeping up with different changes that are going on in town, that just because certain commissions may overlap on one issue does not necessarily mean that their entire charges could be necessarily combined in a commission. So I think the charge is going to become very important when we talk about that, and setting that up and making sure that all of the commissions and their charges have support so that their work can get done.
And if I could just dovetail on that, Maria, thanks. I didn't say it before, but just some overlap is going to happen, period. And in some senses, like where I'm hearing the conversation going here, where this is sort of an in-between, maybe, between human services and TPZ. There's experts in human services that are very much going to come into play for purposes of the charge that we're contemplating here for this housing commission. But at the same time, they're going to need to know where they can actually point people to in terms of where housing is allowed, and they're not going to be, human services isn't the experts in that. So like TPZ, there is necessarily some overlap.
Yeah, I'm not questioning that. You're
and
looking at
to-
me like I'm questioning overlap.
No, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just saying, like, to have that in between,
Yeah.
like, it might seem redundant to some folks, but it's in the end game beneficial for everyone if we're trying to establish that sort of a flow.
If it is made clear in
In the charge.
Yeah. What the area of focus is to be for the respective groups with the overlap. Like in Ag Commission and Conservation, and there's inherent overlap. But it's very clear what their charges are, and so it doesn't create conflict. At least not as...
Yeah, agreed. And I think this is where, it's appropriate for human services to look at their ordinance, just as
Yes.
EMS is currently looking at its ordinance and its charge. And it's important for things to not be siloed. Overlap is helpful and useful, so there are multiple people working on things and bringing different perspective to it.
With that, the focus on collaboration, like having, this December meeting where people can get together, get to know names and faces and feel comfortable reaching out to each other to speak, I think is very important, because I think that helps move things forward.
And I don't mean to belabor, or extend our discussion here, but I still have I'm not quite understanding. When you say it's important that the charge be, I'm trying to think of how that's different from any other charge from any other commission.
It's not.
Or from the committee that we have right now. In other
It's
words, your
not.
charge rate, okay.
Yeah.
That's
no,
what I'm.
I wasn't implying anything by that. I'm
Got
just
it.
saying, yes, overlap is expected.
Well-
Got it.
But in order for things to function and be,
Yeah, you
not
have to
get lost...
Be clear what you
Yeah.
want this particular group to
Yeah.
do. Understood, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, and I I guess I made my view clear that I thought we should have a more general term for our ordinance rather than a specific narrow affordable housing one, which is what we saw in some of the
Right.
subcommittee type thing. But as I think about it, Human Services is one of our very large commissions. It has 9 people. And probably affected by having many different things where they may overlap. If you have a larger number of committee members, you have more opportunity to interact with the other commissions, with a subcommittee being charged to go to another, to work with another commission to do a less important, that's not the big full committee, but to do some of that kind of investigative work. So that's also one of the reasons I think that I already said I thought 9 was the right number, but that would be why I would encourage a larger number, so that you have the possibility of actually getting some work done in small groups, particularly if you have a lot of things that you want to do.
It's good input. I'm not, certainly, it's important and this is exactly what we need when we sit down as an ordinance committee and take a look at it and consider. So thank you.
So I had one other thought that I just wanted to understand everyone else's thinking on. So advisory to the Board of Selectmen, that's usually what all our commissions are, except for things that have statutory.
TPZ being one of the big exceptions, correct.
Right. So in terms of remaining advisory to the Board of Selectmen, goes back to that idea of how do we share our thinking of where we're going, right? So that original committee that existed to make a recommendation for the town's housing plan brought that to the town. And then there's a lot of things in that. And we've talked about how, they've been working on it for a couple of years. If the Board of Selectmen chose to accelerate and say, we really want this done now, how, I would just like to think a little bit more about how we would empower a commission to do that. We're talking about ways that they would connect to other boards and commissions, maybe have subcommittees. But if it's related to TPZ and it's related to economic development, the path where all those intersect is here at the Board of Selectmen. So I just think that it calls for a role of this group to be providing some kind of direction so that we're going all in the same direction. Because if we just set up another commission that says, okay, we got a goal, we're going this way, and we've got a bunch of other commissions also doing that, they're literally pulling at the center instead of funneling into the center so the Board of Selectmen can get things done.
Nick
So
is,
I'm sorry. No, I have a question. So does that mean that you would want flexibility in the charge for the Board of Selectmen to say at one point, here's an action
Come and advise
item.
us.
Yeah, well,
Because we'll take action.
Right,
Yeah.
or, here's something in either the strategic plan or that we would need your commission to investigate and do, that there's leeway in the charge to be
Well,
able to
Yeah, we literally
say
have
that,
things.
even though it's not written in the initial.
Well, that's a really good point, because we have things in the strategic plan related to how we would have conditions for more housing, but we don't have anyone working on that right now. Like, that's not something, I don't think the housing committee is looking at, like, where in town would you build out the sewer line? Maybe they are, I don't know.
I am.
Right, so, but then, do we need the Commission for Housing to be somehow connected to that more? Like, do they have a role?
Again, and this is only because I've had the opportunity, and many of you may not have, to work with the various commissions in different capacities. And any of the commissions that I've been part of and any of the commissions that I've worked with, and there's been a lot of them, take their direction from the Board of Selectmen. We are creating their charge. We're the ones who created all the ordinance is done through the ordinance committee, which the Board of Selectmen are a part of, they make up, which is made up by people on the board. So it is the board who's indicating and dictating exactly what these commissions are doing. So we have the ability to do that. If we want housing to check on the sewer capacity and what the opportunity is for us to extend sewers, we say to them, we'd like you to do this, is there something else you're working on, or is this something you can take up for us?
Right. So that kind of goes to that professional capacity, right? Because they're not gonna be super experts, right? But we do have the planning consultant now.
Well,
for
for
example.
one, and also in a lot of instances, like conservation does and like many of the other commissions do, they go to people who are. SCROG is an available resource. So they can, as a commission, bring in expertise so that they can learn about it and present it to us. And that's exactly what a lot of the commissions have done in the past. So, I'll be really, really candid here. It just seems like we're treating the housing commission as if it's something of a different animal than some of our other commissions. It's a different function, but, okay.
I don't see that either.
I just, but that's
I
kind
think
of
we're
the,
all in support of this becoming a commission.
Yeah.
I think we're all aware of the need. I am.
no, I'm not, and I'm not saying you're not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, well,
That's good.
I mean,
I'm glad to hear it.
that
That's what
public
I'm really-
comment was
let me just say it.
interesting, and I think I just need, before I can integrate that into my perspective and logic, I need more information
Mm-hmm.
and to follow up, and I made the same note.
I'm glad you clarified because that puts
because-
me
No,
in a different
and-
place.
and
Because
I
that's
am-
not what we initially started the conversation, that's not where I
Yeah.
felt it was going,
Well,
so.
I think, Mika, the other part that I want to get across here is that I don't want to overtask our staff. We're probably overtasking them on a few different fronts, and if we just keep accelerating that,
But I'm trying to, and
it's
I
gonna be
agree with
difficult.
you.
right.
We're
And I know
on
you
the
care, I
same
know you care
page
very
there.
much about it, yeah.
We're on the same page on that, but
Yeah.
I'm, in the context of what we're discussing and making the committee into a commission, I'm not sure how the staffing aspect of that impacts on what we're trying to do in ordinance in terms of making it a commission versus a committee.
So
That's where it,
So what we need is just detail, right, about what how the ordinance is gonna read. Is that something that we can somehow get from board members by looking at?
that's what Nick is gonna be working on, that's exactly what, that's our.
Specifically on
That's what we said in the beginning, yeah.
Right,
It will
right,
be
but-
distributed to.
So maybe it is better to do it after the fact.
late,
Instead of
already
any
had
more time spent on here tonight.
I'll go with that, David, I like that.
I've taken all the input though, so duly noted.
And, yeah, I think it's important for everything we do, and this is just thinking long-term, because this commission will be here now, in perpetuity, for all intents and and so I just really urge everyone to think about it outside of the scope of our term of the next 5 years, like really, yeah. I
understand.
just think in everything we do, that has to be important. And I just have a quick question before, yeah.
And I'll just respond to your question. It's in perpetuity until a group like ours decides to do otherwise.
Okay.
It's an ordinance.
Yeah.
So it goes through the process, it can't be changed. We can get rid of commissions as well.
Okay.
So it's not
Can
one
we?
that I would do that with, obviously,
Sure.
but it's, but I understand.
But
it
that's
is.
what I mean in context of the charge. Like, I think it should be kind of like evergreen, so to speak, and not deciduous.
If we're doing something on a permanent, if we're doing something on a permanent basis.
Yeah, that's what we want.
So permanence is something you should consider no matter what decisions we're making. I agree with you, so I understand.
It was a wonderful forest analogy.
Yeah,
Very good.
I love that.
Any additional thoughts on this, or are we good?
I did just have a quick question. So noted housing commission does not typically have town council at meetings. Is that,
Nor does any of the other commissions.
yeah, correct. So I was just wondering, are you expecting that to change or?
No, it was just part of the discussion,
Okay.
so,
And Tom,
obviously in my taking notes.
No, I know,
minutes,
minutes
I'm
are,
just-
that's why I'm asking.
I just thought it was pertinent because there are legal issues related to housing.
Yeah,
And
no,
I
and-
wanted to
Sure
note
are.
the support.
And
for-
additionally, any ordinance meeting most ordinance meetings we've done in the past, we've consulted with our town council because they have to approve. it.
Understandable, understandable. I was just wondering if you were visioning that.
No,
Okay,
no. So,
thank you.
The last comment I'll make is just in regard to our conversation, generally speaking, so everybody's on board. If we say there's an update from a committee or commission, we expect that update to be a two-way thing. So that is our opportunity to input
I
on those
appreciate
types
that
of things when we have that. So don't feel like it's a presentation to you and that's that. But this is exactly what we need to do on these types of situations, is to have the dialogue. So I appreciate it. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. All good? Next item on the agenda is our Board of Finance budget meeting dates. And we opted to take this out of the agenda item. We were gonna put it under consent agenda, but there is a week that, on the agenda, on the calendar, or on this, on the meeting dates, that might be a conflict. So we wanted to take it out so we can discuss that and make sure, that it'll work for everyone. And that if there are gonna be changes, we can discuss what the changes need to be, so we can in turn communicate that to the Board of Finance.
Particularly the February 18th meeting is an important selectmen's meeting.
Is it in the consent agenda folder still?
It
that
is,
right? Okay.
yeah.
I was like, where am
Yeah.
I looking for this?
Consent agenda
Okay,
folder.
yeah.
And
All right.
can I just be candid?
Yes,
I
please.
flagged this because this falls on Beecher and Amity's February break, winter break. And it's the first year in, I want to say, decade, at least, just since I was a kid, that they're having a full week off. And my family was planning on taking advantage of that. I'm in the process.
You could certainly do it.
But
any
I don't
other
want to
time.
disrupt things just for me and my family.
We just need the information for the end of the, because you have to submit your recommendations to the Board of Finance by the end of February. So as long as it's sometime in February,
What date are we trying to change?
February
And
18th.
I wasn't
That's a
trying
Tuesday.
to change it necessarily. I
Tuesday,
just thought if
Because Monday's
if
a
I were
holiday.
planning, I didn't know if other people were trying to take advantage of that, and it might be a multiple person issue, not just an Andrea issue.
Well, no, but it's also, I mean, these are public meetings, so
Yeah.
it's townwide too. So
Yeah.
if people wanted to
Good
listen
point.
in and participate in the budget process, or at least hear about the budget process, that's, you know.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about that detail.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's a very good point for both reasons, but yeah.
Pardon?
February 27th
No,
is not a meeting.
no, that's when we have to file the recommendations by. What's
Thank
that?
you.
I didn't think we had public comment during.
You don't.
During that.
No, but if people wanted to listen, you know, I mean, I just.
The only reason
You can
why.
do that on vacation.
I'll
with
explain
the
why it's in
union.
that week. The only reason why it's usually in that week is because you have a meeting the week before,
Yep.
and you have to have your final recommendations by the end of the month. So in the event you wanted another meeting for whatever reason, it gives you a little some time,
little buffer.
right? In case you wanted some information or you wanted to look some, it doesn't usually happen, but that's why it's that week, so you can schedule one the next week. But you can always do it the week of the 24th.
So I am away that week,
Which week?
the week of the 24th.
The,
Does it need to be separate from the
That was
Board
gonna-
of Selectmen meeting?
that was my
It
question.
seems like
It
we
does
could
not,
Add
but
it to the.
sometimes you have somewhat long meetings, so.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
So,
just
yeah.
sometimes.
We're already at 8 p.m.
So, Tony, does the Board of Finance typically have, their regular meeting is that other week? There's a piece in there for the Board of Finance
They
regular
have their
meeting.
first meeting on the
But they don't-
5th,
right.
and then they'll probably meet again on the 20th. And they,
Will they talk about the budget on the 20th?
yes,
That's their regular
almost
meeting.
always.
Oh, okay. All
Because what'll happen on the 5th is we'll go through the budget. They'll have a list of questions or comments or suggestions. A
So
lot of
in
stuff I
this-
research, I get back to them.
right. Yeah, so in this trajectory, we've already made a decision, and so they have that.
Correct. They have your
So we
recommendations
don't
already.
feed
that.
them our recommendation before that. They can't really,
You give them the
Right.
recommendations by the 27th. Actually, if it's a little earlier than that, it gives us time to process them and get them ready for the Board of Finance, and get them to them in enough time so they can review them. And their first meeting's on the 5th, which is why the 18th is helpful, because it gives us a week or so to put together all your recommendations, get it out to the Board of Finance, they get to review it. The timeline is set in the charter in terms of when your deadlines of when you have to make your recommendation,
Would it be acceptable
which is March 1st.
for us to plan to make this an agenda item on our February 12th meeting?
I'll make the motion.
And try to manage the February 12th meeting so as to allow us to spend some time on this.
That is on you.
With,
Mika.
with the contingency that if for some reason it doesn't give, there's not enough time, or it turns out that there's some, I mean, February is, it just strikes me as there's a lot coming in that, right around that time
Our
of year.
February 14th meeting was one of the longest meetings we've had
So-
till date, guys. Just-
So, yeah, only because it was.
And it was Valentine's Day.
And it was, you know, I'm just
So that
thinking,
didn't
you know,
even
around the time
encourage us
the
to be-
things are happening, you know, we're gonna get some answers in terms of what's happening at the school. It's around the time we'll be full bore with the consultant at the country club. We'll be doing, you know, there's a lot more. So it could be a real full meeting. If Andrea's the only one that has the issue, we can say, let's try to make, I'd rather everybody be there for something like this. Obviously, it's a
Yes,
budget.
I agree.
So, I'd like to recommend that we make it part of our agenda for February and try to, and you know, the staff will try to manage that agenda to allow us to do that. But if it's required, then we have to look at a different date, and we'll set a date at our 12th meeting. That's,
It's good.
that's
Well, we've
outside of
got-
that, that's not the next week.
And what is the date that we hold as a reserve for that month? Is that the 26th that we,
Yeah,
but
which
No,
is
it's
only
Sheila
one
said
day
she's not gonna
before
be there.
not
it's
gonna be
due.
it, so.
Oh, yeah, she was not.
So now Sheila's not there next week, you said.
Well,
On the
but if that's
26th.
our reserve on the 26th, and you're not doing the budget, you're doing things that got bumped off the other meeting,
Yeah.
I can participate by Zoom or miss the meeting. I mean,
So
I
that's
don't
what
wanna miss
we'll
the
do.
budget
We'll make the primary agenda item on the 12th, the
Be
budget.
the budget
Is
or
that
anything
okay?
else
But like, am I
that
the
has to
only
get
one,
done?
if
No,
I,
I got.
That's fine.
Yeah, we got.
are you sure? Cause I'm not,
But Andrea, we want
I think it's
everybody
important to
there.
have-
Hockey season, we're not.
We
going
only
there.
we have 6 people.
I think it's
So
important to have everybody. at the
everybody
meeting.
there, particularly
if
for this.
possible.
This is your sign off. This is our saying, here's the budget we're gonna present. So it's important from my perspective that everybody be there.
The only other thing I want to mention
thank
is,
you.
the Board of Finance is, like, for all intents and purposes, permanently has all of the capital and budget, operating budget meetings in January. If you, those of you who participated in the past, we used to have capital in December, operating in January, just to split it up so there's not a lot of meetings at once. But because of the new structure in the government, that, we now have 5 meetings instead of 4, and the 5th is if necessary. So there's an extra meeting date there.
And they take a little longer than they used to.
And they take longer,
Yeah.
right?
So
Tony,
let's
that
keep that in mind.
That February 4th, though, is there a deadline of February 1st to have the budget done, or? can we
No,
go
all
forward?
of the recommendations have to be to the Board of Selectmen by the 1st.
Okay,
I think except for the Board of Ed, but they come in, you know, the 1st of January or so.
oh, so they're technically in, even though we haven't,
Like
Had
on,
them
this is
presented.
just a hearing to
Okay.
review them.
I
They're
got it.
technically
Yep.
in. We would have
Okay.
distributed them already. We'll have them all electronic this year.
right, so they
So,
can't change their
Our
number
plan is
after the
to,
1st.
yeah, our plan is to do the share,
Yeah,
the share drive that we
that
use
worked
for,
out well.
yeah.
Well,
And we have the program as
software,
well,
yeah.
if anyone wants to use the software program. we
Yeah,
can
that
have
was great.
available.
I thought
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
good too.
So you can do both, you can do, you know.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna move that to the 12th
Correct,
from the 18th?
correct.
Okay.
And we'll identify
Got it?
an appropriate date for anything else we need to cover afterwards. So chances are, we can expect there to be a special meeting
on
in,
this 26th.
yes, sometime late February. All right, everybody's good?
Thank you, everybody.
Good, welcome. Next item on the agenda is the CCW Master Plan update. We've finalized the contract, both parties agreed on the contract. It is with Cooper Robertson right now for signature, and once it's signed, we'll fully execute the agreement, after which Tony and myself will have and Karen will have a meeting with Cooper Robertson to go over administratively the different elements of the meeting and start to indicate what we want, and, the timelines and things of that nature, so that we can obviously present them to the board, and talk a little bit more about how they're gonna go, how things are gonna go. So I've talked to Cooper Robertson about the advisory committee, and they feel it should be diverse. It should be, folks who represent different elements. And I talked to them, my feeling as far as the advisory board is concerned is that it would include some of those groups that we've already talked about, COOPOP, recreation, conservation, housing, EDC.
Rec was not included in the bar grant, so
It wasn't included in the narrative.
Correct, but we can adjust that?
Yes.
Oh,
As far as I've been told, yes, we can.
okay.
So, and I'll verify that with Nick and also with Dale, and I'll make sure with the Department of Economic and Community Development that that's okay. I didn't specifically get their okay on that, but I'll get something in writing to make sure that we're okay with that. So it would be those 5 groups. From my perspective, this is what I'm recommending. Those 5 groups, with EDC or CUPOP doing the lead there, and it's really looking like EDC because that's what the bar grant would like to see. However, I'd also like to add 2 members of the community who we would need to identify, obviously. And I talked to Cooper Robertson about their ability, and I'm just waiting for a definitive answer on this, about their ability to come in with the leadership, with whoever's leading that advisory group on a monthly basis to report to the Board of Selectmen and deliver information and accept information from the Board of Selectmen so that we continue on a monthly basis. We continue to have input in terms of the process without necessarily having to be part of the group there. So ultimately, we do have the ability to influence and understand and identify what's going on there to see exactly what's happening and take the action that we feel is necessary or appropriate. And but we have a what I consider to be a diverse group that's small enough for this to move forward from a logistics standpoint, and they feel very strongly that 7 is the right number. This is Cooper Robertson. They don't want to get it too unwieldy because it's 7 plus it's Tony and myself from a staff perspective, and Karen if one of us isn't available. So it gets to 9 or 11 kind of quickly depending on what other expertise they bring in or whoever else isn't. This is what I'd like to see happen. So that's what I'm presenting and opening to discussion.
Mika, at our last meeting, you said we were gonna have a special meeting specific to this topic. Are we not doing that anymore?
We can. We still have I think everyone understood that we might meet again at the end of this month.
The 23rd, everyone confirmed I held
Correct.
for a special meeting that 4th Wednesday.
Correct. So no, that's still on the table. That's absolutely available
Mika,
for us.
On the 23rd, because I'm cognizant of what time it is here, on the 23rd, would we have like a draft of whatever the charge to this committee is? And is it possible for Cooper Robertson to come and talk with us too?
I don't know
so
about
that-
getting them in. I haven't asked them specifically about that, but we can certainly
Right.
get some information.
Yeah.
Yes, I would expect to have information based on the meeting that we
Yes.
have scheduled so that we
Correct.
can provide. And I'd
that's-
actually like that because it would be, but what I wanted to do is make sure you understood what I'm recommending, and then that way you can give it the thought you want and we can go from there.
So in the spirit of, different commissions in town overlap on their charge a little bit and for some input and collaboration, this would be like a stakeholder group that would be together, would satisfy the requirements of the grant, but they would still be coming to us once a month because we are the Board of Selectmen, this is our project for input, et cetera. So this would really facilitate the collaboration of the stakeholders and the Board of Selectmen without requiring all of us to be in one place at one time. So the 2 things can happen in parallel, and then we can combine at the Board of Selectmen meeting for all that input.
Well said.
I'm a little confused by the EDC or CUPOP portion, because if it's the BOS that's supposed to be kind of the connecting body of government between the steering committee and the project, I'm just confused
Someone
by.
has to lead the meetings. Just
What
like there's
do
a
you
chair.
mean?
Cooper Robertson?
There's a,
Isn't that Cooper Robertson / wouldn't that be
Well, from a
just the
town
chair of
perspective-
those people?
from the town perspective, there would be somebody representing the town who, and as opposed to it being myself or Tony, it would be EDC. And
So what do you mean, the whole commission, so they would be participating
No.
in EDC meetings?
no, it would be a representative from the commission.
Would be, what, the chair is what you're saying?
Exactly.
Or any stakeholder that the chair could appoint as the person representing their group to the stakeholder committee.
I don't know, that didn't make sense to me, in
you're
the
talking-
context
yeah,
of
that's different,
EDC.
yeah.
Oh, in the context of EDC, sorry.
I know,
Yeah.
that line is a little blurry to me. Think I'm missing something. The way it was
Generally
framed
speaking, the way we
previous,
have, here's the way I consider it, the way we have a building committee, the way we have any of our committee or commissions, we assign a hierarchy. There's somebody who kind of leads it,
a chair.
a chair. Okay, so in
And
this
there's a
case,
vice
from
chair.
a town perspective, in terms of our representation, the consultant is doing their job. From our perspective, this is our group that the town is assigning as part of this project. EDC, the representative from EDC would be the person designated as that leader of that particular group. And the reason, one of the reasons I say that is because they're more about, they're less about particulars in terms of what's there. They're not conservation who may want a particular
Well-
item, they're not housing who
They
might
want
want a
business.
particular
Yeah, that,
item.
they
Right?
want business.
No, they want
economic
revenue.
development
They want
growth.
development, they want economic development.
I mean, the fact is, this is a development grant that the town procured, so I understand why you would choose a development-oriented.
Right.
Let's just be transparent about that. So, it seems like you have a specific person in mind.
Actually, be honest, I don't
Okay.
necessarily. From an EDC perspective, I would recommend their chair because I've worked because
Who
it's
is,
somebody
just for the-
Scott Prudhomme. Because of the amount of times the opportunity that I've had to work with him and what I've found in terms of that, and his objectivity and his ability to kind of understand the different angles that we go about on this thing. So that would be it. What I would suggest is that we consider allowing the groups to identify who in their organization
Okay,
is the
so-
best suited for it.
It wouldn't necessarily be Scott, or whoever the
Mm-hmm.
EDC point of contact is selecting
Correct.
the members.
Correct.
The members. Interesting.
Is that, that's it, okay, is it, so your intent then would be to ask each of these groups who they want?
Yes.
And who would review and decide on,
If there was an issue, I think we would take it up as a board and take it up as an issue.
it, so they'd be presenting it to the board?
Correct.
I mean, could you?
One
have
of the
a-
things I'm sorry.
I was going to ask if you have a proposal, or if is there an action that needs to happen tonight?
No, I'm not expecting any action unless the board feels like somebody wants to make a motion and we want to do something along those lines. What I'm suggesting, particularly if we're gonna meet on the 23rd, if you feel it's late in the night, or it's late in this meeting, and if we're gonna have the 23rd, then there's no action. If you feel like we want to make a decision now, I'm all for it. But,
I mean, we don't have much left on our agenda. We just have the consent agenda to approve next. But so, I mean, I think there's interest, at least on my end, in moving things along. So if there's a proposal to
Well,
consider.
I would really like to hear from Cooper Robertson, or at least see what, you're saying the contract is close to being signed.
It is.
We haven't, so we don't have that. I was part of the interview, and I had looked at what their proposal was, and then the bar grant came in after that. Like, I didn't have that bar grant in front of me when I was at that, so I'm still a little unclear. We've heard from other groups, if you guys watch the other meetings, there's been discussion that says, like, Board of Selectmen shouldn't have any role at all because of it's a bar grant and it shouldn't be political. But I don't think I understand that, and I don't think I understand what we could or could not do. You know, there's been some talk to say that we can't be on the committee. Now, Economic Development Commission did actually say that it's for the Board of Selectmen they're not precluding the idea that a member of the Board of Selectmen, in addition to Mika, would serve on it. So I would like to see some draft that we could then react to. We could take our time to look at and then react to and have a further discussion about it.
draft of what?
Of how you want to proceed. Like, remember that I made some questions when we were looking at all the different proposals, and my second set of questions was all about how the Board of Selectmen stays central to the process. And those are actually the questions I'm going to go back to. And so when I understand where we're going, I'll be able to see, well, is this doing what I wanted it to do? That's certainly what I talked to Cooper Robertson about when we had a chance to talk with them, but I haven't talked to them since.
What,
So just like any other ad hoc committee, I'm just trying to get a handle on what I'm hearing. We would want to see a charge, when you say written out, a charge.
I didn't
and,
think
you
of
know,
it as an ad hoc committee at all. I thought of
No,
this
I'm
as
just
the
saying
project,
that
in the strategic plan, it says this is the project of the Board of Selectmen. So now we're talking about devolving it away in some manner. I'm not sure
I
how.
didn't mean to make that, I was just saying as an analogy for how other committees
Well,
are
no, it is
created,
an ad
that
hoc.
there's a charge and there's a list of responsibilities
Yeah.
of the committee and of its makeup, so that we could take a look at exactly what that steering committee's charge is, how it's gonna be made up, and then we can react to that and have a discussion about
Yeah,
how we
and-
would like that to
And
proceed.
we've had a lot of conversation already as a board. I don't know how much of it's, the public is aware of, but we have had conversation about how the board stays central to this. This is a very important topic. It's been a long time coming. We finally have professional help. Now the question is, how is the Board of Selectmen going to direct the work of the professionals? Not if someone else is doing that. How does it happen?
the Board of Selectmen meets once a month to direct the actions of the entire town.
Yep.
I don't see that meeting once a month is in any way lessening our ability to stay central to a project, just simply one project and the various aspects of everything else we do. What I'm suggesting is that we are very central to it, because every month somebody's coming in front of us and telling us and describing what's being done, and we're commenting and inputting on that. So if we can do that once a month and actually take care of the entire business of the town, I'm certain that we can do that and take care of all the business associated with one single project. I do give this board that much credit. So I don't see it as taking the Board of Selectmen out of it, quite frankly. I see this as a bigger role than if two of us were on the board, were on a committee for the whole thing. Because we're gonna know what's happening, and we're gonna be input on it on a monthly basis.
So now you're envisioning that no other member of the Board of Selectmen is on the committee itself?
I said the 7 members, so yes, I am, correct.
So-
I don't see where we would need to be if anything that's being done is being considered by the entire board.
Well, I think,
thought that was just like a stakeholder group.
Correct.
Like a steering committee, but that's a stakeholder, so the stakeholders can discuss, based on the committees that they're coming from, they may have input based on their committee's charge and their area of expertise, and that input, that will matter, in the collaboration of all of our committees in town coming back to us, so that we have that additional information when we get our presentations from Cooper Robertson,
Correct.
and we're tasked with making a decision or steering something in a certain direction, et cetera.
So similar to the way TPZ is putting together the POCD. They're going to get input from all the stakeholder groups,
Right.
including conservation, et cetera, but we've been very clear that TPZ holds the pen.
Sheila,
They're
I'll
they're
stop you.
running that project.
I'll stop you only because POCD, SLR has been engaged now for months.
Yeah.
They met with TPZ for the first time about a month ago, and we're talking about somebody coming in front of us every single month as part of our agenda. So there's right away a very significant difference from the POCD process. There are some parallels, but there is a very significant difference from that process and what I'm describing here.
Right, I'm just saying the role that TPZ is functioning in, right? The consultant's working for TPZ, gathering stakeholder
Correct.
information. TPZ is going to be making the
Yes, very-
decisions.
yes.
Do you see this proceeding the same way? The Board of Selectmen will be functioning like TPZ is for the POCD. The Board of Selectmen will be functioning that way for the country club
Very
plan.
much so, very much so.
So that's where I just would like to see on paper what that looks like.
I'm not sure that needs a separate document. I mean, at the end of the day, the Board of Selectmen is the entity that has the authority to authorize Mika as the first selectman to bind the town to certain commitments. Those commitments are recommendations from what we're describing as a steering committee, as whatever we want to call it. Those recommendations are ultimately going to come in front of this board as an appropriation request for whatever the project is, or authorization to sign a contract to actually do the work. So, I mean, this board is not out of the loop. I mean, ultimately, for any of the recommendations to happen, it's still gonna need this board's approval.
And then all the meetings are public meetings, recorded,
course.
public comment on the agenda, that sort of thing, or
The-
is that envisioned?
The
Yes.
only thing, I mean, I think what we lost with the bar grant was that this board was originally going to be the entire group that interacted with Cooper Robertson. That was
That's-
what we had decided at the board. That was what we talked about at the board
No, that's,
before the grant came in. The grant came in with a
That's-
different steering committee. I, for one, would like to see the individuals that are chosen for that, and for us to actually talk about those people and their qualifications and to select them rather than to just let it be done by boards, commissions, whatever. I would think that we should do that, because if we're giving up our 100% of our responsibility, other than you are our representative, yes, you speak for the board in those situations, but originally we wanted to be there because we're the people who are elected to handle the problem. And I think it's a very polarized issue that if we don't have strong voices on every side, we're going to be accused of just whitewashing a problem and not really responding to what the citizens of the town want. And I, for one, can't go along with that. So I want to see who's going to be on that and have a chance to talk about exactly their qualifications and why or why not they should be on that group.
a couple of things, David. I don't, and if you recall, I believe we don't want this to be political. We don't want to whitewash this, which is a reason that I suggested, and we spent quite a time discussing the fact that by only having the board, in my view, I see that as complete contrary to what you're just suggesting. If it's just simply the board who's meeting with Cooper Robertson and providing input and making decisions, I think that over-politicizes it, and it takes it away. I think having more stakeholders, different stakeholders, diverse stakeholders from these different groups is what makes it more broad.
A lot
particularly
of people voted on the compromise to Cooper Robertson because they felt like they would be here to express what we thought the voters wanted. And now that we're not going to be there for that,
I'm trying to understand why you feel we're not going to be there for that. If every time they meet and they describe what they're doing and how they're doing it in front of us for us to
I think the steering
comment on.
committee, though, is what they're going to be talking to on a regular basis.
Okay. And
Therefore, I want input on the steering committee that's far more than the general things that you've spoken to.
so
That's all.
define that, please.
I just said that. I want to know who the people are going to be. I want us to select them. I want us to talk about them. I want us to talk about the pros and cons. And I want to be absolutely sure that we have strong voices from all sides of the issue that we've heard about, and not just railroading it down to more of a development side, which was where Cooper Robertson was weak, in my estimation. I think we need some strength to balance that for the town, because I don't think all the town is as gung-ho on development as that.
The position, the position that I've always taken is the one that's here. As a matter of fact, I've always recommended, and I've always indicated how I want this done in terms of the groups that I'm suggesting represent this. And I was also elected as a leader. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here is indicate to you what I feel is in consideration for everything that everybody has said and everything that we've discussed, a process by which we meet those criteria to the best degree possible from my perspective, while delivering what I feel is necessary for us to make something happen here, which is exactly what I signed on to do. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't think it's unreasonable for us to have some say in who's there, but I also feel the people who have been working together as an organization for, in many instances, years, have a better idea of who's qualified than we might. So I'm not
We are the
necessarily.
elected officials of this town to manage this issue. Cooper Robertson works for us, for our town.
No, there's nobody arguing that point.
So, but what you just said scared me.
Why?
Because you're saying they're telling us what to do.
No, the
No.
commissions.
I said the commissions to identify the best person on their, They're
Mika,
the
so are
ones-
you failing to remember the history, our kind of tainted history of commission appointments in recent years?
Well, I don't understand how that comes into play.
Okay.
Are you forgetting that the Democrats, that you're referring to parties, the Democratic are the majority party? So in most cases, it's likely that it would be somebody just by sheer numbers. Now, what I'm suggesting is that we ask them who's the best qualified in your organization.
And that should be our call, to look at resumes, to look at meeting minutes, to do our homework based on those appointments, or the compilation of those commissions, to vet who is qualified for this, because we are the elected officials. on
We have
this
the
matter.
opportunity to do that. Do it. If that's what you'd like to do, do it. Bring it in, let's discuss it. That's the way this operates. That's how it works. There's nobody saying that
Well, we
that
don't know.
shouldn't be
We're
the
learning
case.
how it works as live action right now.
Really?
So, what do you mean, really? This
I-
is the first time, like, legitimate time. Like, we are talking, the first time I've heard this idea
It's
about
not the first-
EDC being,
No.
Mika,
I have,
we
as
talked
far as the
about
EDC
the
is
bar.
concerned, possibly. But before, I have always indicated that I felt the representation should be from the people from these different commissions. I've always felt that. There has never been a time where
Correct.
where I've not said that that's what I wanted to see.
I'm not saying otherwise. What
Mm-hmm.
I am saying is this is the first time that this framework of composition,
Yes.
even adding recreation to it, has been presented to us, to at least me.
Okay.
I don't know what you guys talk about before meetings,
But
but
please, go.
so how? I mean,
Andrea, I didn't say this is the way it's going to be. This is what I'm suggesting. You suggested that we look at the different people so we're in a position, and there's nothing to stop us from doing that. We can all take a look at all the people who make up the commissions and identify those people who we might feel are more appropriate, as you suggested, David. It's the ones who you may want to come in. We want to have discussions on that, we can have discussions on that. But
I want to make clear for the record, I am not opposed to having this stakeholder composition. I
Okay.
think I think there's great value in that.
okay,
What I am opposed is to not being well informed and not having a say in the composition of those stakeholders, and not having well-established points of contact, information sharing, and advising as a board of selectmen to that stakeholder group.
I appreciate
I
it.
just want to clarify that.
And to that end, I understand your concern. I think it's a legitimate concern, and we'll consider it, and we'll plan on getting together on the 23rd. I'll identify some additional information from Cooper Robertson, and we'll see if we can develop a means by which we can agree that, and we may not all agree, but we'll figure a way that we can make it as equitable as possible, and I understand your point. I understand your point.
Thank you.
And it's exactly what I would be doing.
Well, and I don't think it's
exactly what I
just my
intend to do.
point. Let's
Well,
be clear.
I think David expressed a very similar view. So, yeah, so it's, that's enough for me. We can consider it.
I just don't, I think that there are there are people out there who have very strong opinions that may be very different from people who may be on a committee that it's formed by each commission picking people. And there will be a lot of criticism of that. So if we don't have representatives of those groups, remember these groups are there's a whole group out there that formed basically on their own in opposition to development of the country club, and that was a citizens group that just got together, formed their own group. I mean, that says a lot about whether or not our commissions are really serving all the interests of the people who are out there. We've ignored at least one citizen petition that came that came to the previous board with over 300 signatures on it, and just never gave them an
Never even made it
answer.
public.
What?
Yeah, it was never even made public, to my
It came to
recollection.
the board and we never gave them any answer. We didn't give them any time whatsoever. And that's the way that this problem has been exacerbated, gasoline thrown on the embers of the fire along for 10 years. So I don't think adding to that problem is going to help us.
Here's my view, David, is that I believe the consultant would do what we hired the consultant to do, is what I feel. We will get what we talked about and what we're looking for. What I don't want to see is us taint the process simply by not being able to come to an agreement on who should work with the consultant. Because the consultant, from my perspective, is going to sit down in front of us every month. If the consultant did their work with just the staff and then sat down with us every month, we would get the same result. You know, but it would be based on what the staff is saying. By getting these other people engaged in the process, I feel there's more input. There's more input we receive, there's more input they receive. So there's a better opportunity for us to deliver exactly what you're describing, something that's not one-sided. So that's the reason I felt, and I've always felt, that it's important that we have these different people involved. So
Well, we've got our next date set. Can we
Sure.
table the rest of this discussion for that date?
I think we can. Maria, please.
I just wanted to say, I think we all have the same goal in mind, and that is to make sure that the voices in Woodbridge are represented, and that we come to the best possible decision for this master plan based on what the residents of Woodbridge want and what is best for our community. So that's what I hear in everyone's comments, and I think we can come to some kind of process by which we're able to get some stakeholder input from the different groups, and we make it a balanced and fair process. But I think that, to everyone's point, the process and the charge need to be outlined so that we can think thoughtfully about it and provide some input. But I think we're all here really for the same goal, to do what's best for the people of Woodbridge, and I think that the process by which we get there could easily be outlined and discussed, and that way we can provide some input and make sure that it's best reflective of how we want to move forward.
Agreed. Thank you.
We'd end that topic on a positive note. Good job.
Yeah,
Good
very
job,
nicely done.
Maria.
And it is true, but I sincerely
Well, it's
believe the
true.
same thing.
I mean, that is what we all want.
All right.
We have the,
As part of this, we'll end up by saying we will plan to meet on the 23rd to further discuss this topic. Thank you. And-
I may just get catering, because I feel like that special meeting is going to.
well, if we have
Yeah, no, exactly. If we get it all lined up.
Well,
we-
I'll still feed you. I'll still have.
I better understand what your concerns are, so I think I'll work to try to address them in such a way as we can move forward with this.
appreciate that.
And the last item on the agenda is a consent agenda. The receipt of the town clerk's report, the request for election day sales, already approved through the registrar's approval process. This is a request from the Amity Mock Trial Club and the approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Is there anything on the agenda that there is a concern with? If there is not, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries.
Now.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'm sorry, my kid.